Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Winchester Planning Committee, taking place from the Walton Suite at the Winchester Guildhall. It's Wednesday, the 19th of July 2023, and the time is 9:30. My name is Councillor Jane Rutter. I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. To my right is Councillor Edwards, who is the Vice Chair of the committee. Around the table we have the other elected members of the committee, and we are supported today by a number of officers. We have Robert Green, who's at the side at the moment, and Simon Avery from the planning team. We have Dan Lucas, our legal advisor. The case officers will sit here. Megan Osborne is the case officer for the first item. We have Matthew Watson over there from Democratic Services, who supports the committee and operates the recording equipment. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded to the City Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available, and advice on how to turn this on is set out on the website. Please can I remind everyone to ensure their mobile phones are on silent or preferably turned off entirely. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Please look at the handout provided on your chairs or the information slides displayed as you walked in and during the breaks for further guidance about this meeting. Finally, can I welcome all the members of the public who've come to the meeting. Those of you who have registered to speak, I will invite you forward when it is time for you to make your contributions. The microphone is turned on by pressing the button on the base of the unit, and a timer will appear on the screen to remind you of your remaining time. And the timer only starts when you start speaking, so don't worry about switching on the mic. Okay, let's turn to the agenda. So, Matthew, do we have any apologies and deputy members, please?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. So we have apologies from Councillor Reid this morning, who's been replaced by Councillor Pearson, and also apologies from Councillor Lee, who's been replaced by Councillor Wallace. Thank you, Chair.
Welcome both. Any disclosures of interest, members? Councillor Ashford.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 7, Jasmine Court. I'm a ward member for the area. I haven't spoken to the candidate, the resident, about the application. So I wish to
just for the avoidance of any doubt, you've had no discussions with anybody about that application. Okay. Anybody else? No? Good. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Councillor Small.
Also item number 7. It's in my ward. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's just for the avoidance of any doubt. That's good. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting. Members, can I ask you to agree those minutes, please? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And we also need to accept the update sheet as an addendum to the report for today. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Okay, we now move to the first planning application, item number 6 on our agendas, which is at Bray House, 31 Chilbolton Avenue, Winchester. And our presenting officer is Megan Osborne. If you'd like to give us your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add a verbal update to the update sheet if possible. Last night we received a response from Ecology regarding the biodiversity net gain report, stating that the trees proposed in the report were not satisfactory to meet the required net gain. Therefore, I'm recommending the wording of condition 15 is amended to add a section saying a revised biodiversity net gain shall also be submitted to the local planning authority for approval prior to commencement of the development hereby approved.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll start. The application is located on the western side of Chilbolton Avenue in the city of Winchester. There are dwellings to the north and south of the site. The dwellings to the north are single detached properties. To the south, the development is called King George V Place and was built in 2016 for the erection of 9 dwellings. To the west, the site shares its boundary with the golf course. The proposal is to demolish the existing dwelling and replace with 9 new dwellings. The existing house is not considered to be a non-designated heritage asset. The existing building on the site copies the historic design styles, but in itself is not historic. There have been a number of developments within the surrounding area. Directly to the south, there is a development of 9 dwellings at King George V Place, which was refused at planning committee and then allowed on appeal. To the south of this is a development at Cognott Square for 14 residential units, and further down the road are further developments of which was 1 dwelling into multiple dwellings. Opposite the site, there are also examples of built development where they build to the front and to the rear of the site. This plan shows the difference between the existing house on the site and the proposed development in relation to the other existing developments in the area. You can see the red line here. I'm just going to take you through some of the elevations. So this is the elevation of plot 1. The front elevation and the rear elevation. You can see they're using the level changes on the site. So the levels drop to the rear of the site towards the golf course. There's a proposed balcony to the rear of this plot, and the side elevations of this balcony are proposed to be obscurely glazed. This is the side elevation of that dwelling. And these are the floor plans of the proposed unit 1. It's got lower ground floor area, as you can see it using the levels, and then the ground floor area going into the kitchen, living room, dining room, and upstairs to bedrooms, and a further one on the top floor. Just to take you through some of the sections of this property in relation to the neighbouring property at King George V Place, number 9. And there is a distance of approximately 7.5 metres between these 2 dwellings. And there's also a level change between the properties. So King George V is on higher ground than this property in plot 1. This is showing another section between those 2 boundaries. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the relationship between plot number 1 and King George V, number 9, and that's 7.5 metre change. And there's a drop in levels, and there's a proposed pleached hedging in between the 2 properties. The side of elevation of the balcony on plot 1 is also obscurely glazed. This is the elevations of plot 2 and 3. They mirror each other. So the front elevation and both sides and to the rear there. And these are the floor plans. The floor area of these 2 dwellings is 238 metres squared each. These are the elevations of plots 4 and 5. You can see the front elevations and the rear elevations there. You can see they're utilising the level changes in these plots as well. And these are the side elevations. The one on the top of the screen is the one that's on the boundary with the neighbouring property, number 33, Tiverton Avenue. And these are the floor areas. The floor areas are proposed. Plot number 4, 238 metres squared, and plot number 5, 232 metres squared. This is plot 6 elevations. This is the plot towards the front of the site, closest to the boundary of number 33, Tiverton Avenue. And the floor area. This floor area is 207 metres squared. And the elevations of plots 7 and 8, which are the same. And the floor plans. The floor plans say these both are 176 metres squared. And then elevations of plot 9, the carport to the side. and the floor plans. Take you through some of the sections. So this is the section of the rear dwellings. So on the left-hand side is plot number 1, and you can see the relationship between King George V Place number 9 there, and the level differences between those two dwellings. If you measure the front of plot number 1, front elevation is approximately 9 metres in height, and that is the same as the approximately the same as the height of the dwellings in King George V Place, but there is a level change between those two dwellings. And the rear elevation, which you can't see in this, the height of the dwellings from the ground floor is 12 metres, and that is approximately the same as the dwellings in King George V Place as well. Right, this is a side section of the site. And this is the front street scene. Look at the 4 houses to the front. To the right hand side is 33 Bolton Avenue, and to the left hand side is King George V Place. So you can see the relationship between the properties and the neighbouring sites. Concerns have been raised regarding the subsidence and the fire safety as a result of the proposed development, and these elements are matters for building control and therefore not a planning issue and haven't been addressed as part of my report. Through some photos. This is the front elevation of the existing house, and this is the rear elevation. And then over to the right hand side of the screen, you can see King George V Place there. They're the dwellings to the front. And an aerial photo of the site. So you can see the single dwelling that is proposed to be demolished and replaced with these 9 units. And to the south of that, they are the King George V dwellings. There's a photo here of the existing house, number 31. And then to the left-hand side of the screen, there's a street scene of King George V Place. And this is further down the street. So to the left-hand side is number 31, which is the application site. And straight on to the right is number 33. And this is standing within the garden looking at King George V Place. And that is number 9, so the dwelling's at the rear of that site. And this is standing at the front of the site, looking at King George V Place to the dwellings to the front of the site. And just to show you a few examples of some of the other developments in the area, these are further up the road from the site, so further down south. There have been a number of developments front and back on a number of these sites of large units. The applicant has worked well with officers and amended plans accordingly. The proposal is for 9 dwellings in this location and results in a development of 22 dwellings per hectare. It is acceptable and not out of keeping with the spatial characteristics of the surrounding area. The dwellings are large and large plots, but not incongruous when it comes to any other developments within the surrounding area. The proposal will be visible from neighbouring properties, but will not have an unacceptable adverse impact on residential amenity. Overall, the scheme is well designed and will create a distinctive addition to the local area. Therefore, it's considered the proposal is acceptable and in line with relevant development plan policy and design guidance. This application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions as set out in my report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Megan. Now we move to public speaking. And our first public speaker is a supporter. We don't have an objector registered to speak, although we have had objections. And the supporter is Simon Makola. Welcome. You will have 3 minutes once the timer starts when you start speaking. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of our application today. My name is Simon Makola and I'm a director at Shorewood Homes. We are a Winchester-based house builder focused on delivering high quality, energy efficient houses in Winchester and throughout Hampshire. Over the last 7 years, we have been working towards establishing a track record and reputation for delivering attractive and traditionally styled homes designed to stand the test of time and which sit comfortably within their surroundings. We have worked collaboratively throughout this application process with your officers and would like to thank them for engaging with us from the outset and providing constructive feedback in order to arrive at the scheme that is presented before you today. This positive engagement has led to significant improvements to the original plans, such as a reduction from 3 proposed access points to a single access to improve highway safety and to enable the retention of established yew hedge, which is a prominent feature of this part of Chilbolton Avenue. Changing the proposed rear build line to be commensurate with that of the adjacent King George V Place development. Additional landscaping and the inclusion of enhanced biodiversity features. Improved and robust boundary treatments to ensure the privacy of neighbouring amenity spaces is protected. Site is located in a sustainable location with good access to local facilities, amenities and public transport. Officers agree that the site can accommodate a mix of 9 family homes with spacious gardens and ample off-street parking. All of the houses will be built to a level equivalent of an EPC rating of A, which is currently the highest in terms of water and energy efficiency. Whilst we adopt a fabric-first approach to sustainability, the new houses will also include the use of energy and water efficiency features such as high-performance insulation, photovoltaic panels, and electric vehicle charging points. Given the recent changes to the building regulations, it is further envisaged that the new houses will utilise triple glazing and air source heat pumps. The proposals are compliant with both national and local policy, and we have no objections from any statutory consultees. The case officer states in their report that, and I quote, "The plans are well designed and will create a distinctive addition to the local area." In summary, in your officer's professional opinion, this application is worthy of your support. They recommend approval and we hope you agree. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Just wait a second, members. Do we have any questions of clarification for our representative from Shorewood Homes? Can I just ask, I know that our officer has pointed out that the issue of subsidence and the impact of such a lot of building on a current garden site on neighbouring properties is not actually a planning matter. Nevertheless, I do want to reassure, I hope you can reassure neighbours about those aspects which are in fact building control aspects. But if you could just say a few words about how you're going to be approaching this.
Yeah, so it's not uncommon for us to be in a situation where we're building adjacent to an existing property. And the way that we approach this is positively through appointing a party wall surveyor if it's necessary. And we go through that full process of making sure that any ground disturbance, anything potentially that may have an impact on that adjacent property is ironed out in the design before we even start, but obviously then is monitored throughout that whole process. And that's something we would just do as a part of the course. So.
Otherwise your houses would fall down, wouldn't
Well,
they?
yeah,
So it's
quite.
in your interest to do it.
We are lucky that we have a lot of chalk in Winchester.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Any other questions, members? No? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. You may return to your seat. Right, Megan, we'll now return to you. Do you have any updates on what you've heard from our member of the public? No?
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, members, I think we'll take questions on any part of the report. Who would like to start? Right, well, I'm going to ask. So can you just tell me, the previous application next door was the King George V site. So that was turned down by the planning committee, or was that turned down by officers?
Turned down by planning committee.
At planning committee. Yeah, I can see why. And then it went to appeal and the inspector approved it.
That's correct, yes.
Right, okay. So has that had a material impact on your consideration of this application?
It has in parts, yes. in that it sets a precedent to the size of the dwellings and the location of the dwellings.
Okay, and the City of Winchester Trust object to this because they consider that the existing building is worthy of retention. So could you just explain the reasoning behind not agreeing with them and why you think it's worth knocking that down for the sake of these 9 houses?
We consulted with our conservation officers, historic environment, and they assessed it, and they considered that the building appears historic. However, it's mock historic, if so many words, and therefore they don't consider it to be a historical asset. It doesn't show up in the later maps of Chiltern Avenue. Therefore, they couldn't consider it to be a historical asset.
Okay. Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. On sustainability, I'm pleased to see that this is being considered to achieve level 5, and that fulfills their requirement of CP11. But when we look at the conditions, we're only asking for level 4. I think we need to tidy that up, particularly because everybody is agreeing on level 5, so it should be in the paperwork.
I don't think we're able to do that, Councillor Laming, but perhaps you could explain why, Mrs. Osborne.
The CP11 doesn't require that level, and therefore we haven't put it in the conditions. However, building regs have recently been updated, so it will actually, these dwellings will have to meet a level higher than this level. But I can't condition it because it doesn't have that wording in our policy. Sorry.
Yeah, but we've got CP11, which we should be conforming to, because if we've got a policy, we should be using it.
Yeah.
I know it's a technicality, Megan, but I do feel that very strongly that we should be actually supporting the climate emergency.
Yeah.
And writing that in when everybody else is agreeing to it.
I agree, and they are complying to policy CP11, and it will be in the new wording of the new policy that it will be updated. Yes.
It'll be in the new plan, Councillor Laming. Thank you. I've got a question. So we're proposing a new condition or an extra condition about trees, and this is to do with biodiversity net gain, isn't it? So I know from November, all sites will have to produce a 10% biodiversity net gain. Sites like this are going to really struggle, aren't they, to produce 10%? I think we're getting 4% out of this. Is that what we're expecting? And we've produced a technical advisory note, which is a material planning consideration. So could you explain why we're putting up with only 4% when we're aiming for 10?
It's not, as you pointed out, it's not a statutory requirement yet until November, and therefore I can't insist on that extra percentage. In this instance, we encourage developers to meet a higher standard as much as they can, but we can't insist anything further at the moment.
And there's a document, isn't there, about biodiversity, and presumably that includes things like bird and bat boxes and hedgehog runs and all the rest of it. I'm just assuming that
it does. There is a provision of 9 bat boxes. So there's 1 in each dwelling and 9 bird boxes as well. And there'll be hedgehog holes in the fences, etc. So that's all put in the ecology report, which has been conditioned under condition 15.
Lovely. Councillor Ashwell.
Thank you. Megan, policy CP2 of the local plan usually requires that we have 2 to 3 bedrooms. So could you just explain why we're going against that policy this time?
I considered this in this application and looked at the general character in the surrounding area, and there is a mix in this development of 3 and 4 bedroom dwellings, the higher percentage being 3 bedroom dwellings, and therefore I consider it to be acceptable in the character of this surrounding area, in that it's family homes, it's larger dwellings and big plots. So I found that it is acceptable in this instance.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wallace.
to follow up on that, how, I'm just wanting to probe that a little bit more. We obviously have a shortage of smaller dwellings in Winchester. So can you just explain a bit more why you consider that to be acceptable? Sorry, I didn't just like it to understand a bit further on that.
Yeah, can I
Yes,
jump in?
please.
Yeah, I know Megan has looked into this carefully. One of the things that we have to take into account as well is that the King George V Place site to the south went to appeal. The officer assessing that application considered the housing mix issue, came to the same conclusion as Megan, that in this character area, larger properties were very characteristic, and that was acceptable. That went to appeal, and the inspector didn't pick up or didn't take any concerns out of it that we should be looking on these sites for 2-bed units. So that is a very strong material consideration in this case, that it went to appeal on the adjoining site. That issue wasn't a problem for the inspector.
Thank you, Simon. I think it's probably an issue that we need to address in the new local plan, and perhaps move away from defining houses by numbers of bedrooms to square meterage, because these houses, you know, they claim to be 3-bedroom and they've got like 3 sitting rooms and 2 studies and, you know, storage rooms and dressing rooms and garden rooms. And but they're big luxury houses, and people expect to have, you know, all these extra rooms in big luxury houses. So maybe it'll take the pressure off other areas in Winchester where small houses are being extended. Maybe those people will buy these houses and not extend the smaller houses. We'll see. Anyway, it is what it is, and we have this huge development next door which went through on appeal. So, you know, it's a huge impact on this one, I think. Okay, any more questions, or shall we move to debate? Councillor Wallace, are you a question?
Yes, please. Nutrient neutrality. There was a section in the report on this. Can you just go through that again for us, please, so I can make sure I understand how the nutrient neutrality requirements have been achieved?
Do you want me to start from the beginning? So every
Simply, if you
every
can.
property, every new overnight accommodation, every dwelling requires an amount of mitigation towards nitrates and phosphates. In this instance, there's 9 dwellings, and it's calculated at an average of 2.4 per people per unit for nitrates and phosphates. The nitrates mitigation we have in the past put a grampian condition on, and developers would normally buy an amount of credits to mitigate against that. The phosphates are slightly harder to come by, but the developer has agreed and signed a legal agreement with a local site called the Grange in Alresford, where they've agreed the amount of phosphate credits for these proposed units. And therefore, we find that acceptable, and there is a grampian condition to further secure that as well, so it secures the nitrates and phosphates.
Okay, shall we move to
Thank you.
debate? Debate. Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind the development next door, I see very little doubt that we have to take everything into consideration and approve this. Although the whole neighbourhood of Kilbolton Avenue has changed dramatically over the last few years with a tremendous amount of infill. I'm very sorry to see that. In this particular case, I'm glad that they are building a sustainably better house than is normal at the moment. But I would like to have seen it go further, but we are where we are. So I should be supporting the officer in this case.
Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, and first I'd like to thank Megan for a very comprehensive report. Thank you very much. I have no issue with this. It strikes me that the developer has met the challenge of the changes of building regulations in the direction that we would want from our sustainable housing and meeting the challenges of the climate emergency. It's always interesting how when we start talking about nitrates and phosphates from land that wasn't farming land, it begs the question as to where that actually is coming from. And there only can be one source, and that's the new buildings themselves. But I don't see any issue within the planning that Megan hasn't covered. So from that point of view, I agree with the conditions that are there, and of course the points that's been covered in the update sheet. So thank you very much, Megan. You allow me to agree very much with what you said. Thank you.
I would like to propose that we remove completely permitted development rights from these houses. The biodiversity net gain being so low, only about 4%, and that's going to be with a new trees condition as well, means that every inch of green space around these new homes is going to be vital. Now, if we don't remove PDR, permitted development rights, it is possible that people will put in garden offices, extra sheds, and indeed extensions and so on. We already have a condition to remove some permitted development rights, I believe, into roofs and things, but I would like to extend that to all P. And that doesn't mean that nobody can ever build anything. It just means that we have to look at it and consider it, and mitigation has to be put in place on the biodiversity side, particularly if it's after November when a 10% net gain becomes a requirement, although not necessarily in very small areas. So that is my proposal. Are all members in favour of that? Is that agreed? Thank you. Is there any more contribution to debate? No? Okay, members, so this application is recommended for approval. Can I see with the amended conditions as described? So can I see all those members in favour, please? That is all members, I believe. Okay, thank you very much. So that application is approved. We'll have a short break whilst we change the presenting officer, and then we'll move to the next item. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I'd like to welcome Cameron Finch, who is our new presenting officer. And this is item number 7 on our agendas, Jasmine Cottage Hillside, Kitnox Hill in Kirdridge. And Cameron, if you'd like to describe the application to us, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So what we have is an improved extension and refurbishment of the existing dwelling on site, detached 4-bedroom dwelling, and then an extension to an existing garage to provide a slightly larger garage, and also to provide annex accommodation on site as well. Just to provide a further verbal update before commencing with the presentation, just to note we did receive further representation from a neighbour overnight. And they have raised comments and concern regarding where supporting comments came from, the height of the garage on the boundary, materials, and then the bamboo that's proposed as well, which is covered in the report. So we have the location plan first. So the site is outlined in red, the residential curtilage of it, and the existing dwelling there, and then the garage is also labelled as existing in the northwestern corner. So we have the aerial photograph of the site, outlines the surrounding context, so neighbours to the southwest there, and then more open fields, and then further screening provided by trees slightly further away from the residential curtilage. So we have the proposed site plan here, showing the extent of the alterations within the site, so to the dwelling there, and then the extension to the garage at the bottom. So we have the existing elevations here of the dwelling on site. And then this is the first set of proposed elevations for the dwelling. So an extension including intersecting gables and flat roofs, material palette consisting of a mixture of brick, tile hanging, and then dark timber cladding. And then some further elevation drawings there. We then have the existing elevations of the garage. And then we have the proposed elevations of the garage, measured from the plans. The ridge height of the proposed extension measures to approximately 4.9, with an eaves height of approximately 2.4 meters. And then we have the proposed annex plan there. Just to note, measured from the boundary just to the bottom there has been measured from these plans, and also the proposed site plan of approximately 0.7 meters at the closest point. We then have some site images. So this shows the dwelling as existing. And a further contextual photo there, including the dwelling. We then have an image looking away from the dwelling towards where the proposed garage and annex would sit. Then an image from the neighbouring property, Six Hillside, looking towards the location of the proposed garage extension. And then a slightly closer image there, also within the rear garden of Six Hillside. To conclude the presentation, recommendation is to permit this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cameron. We now move to public speaking, and our first speaker is an objector, Steve Wallin. Please come forward, and I think you've got a presentation as well. Okay, the officers will deal with that. Thank you very much. When you are ready, just start speaking, and you've got 3 minutes.
Do you want to wait for the chart?
Yeah, that's fine.
First chart. Hey, Georgia and I moved into Six Hillside in May 2011. Image A, please. Jasmine Cottage. Jasmine is a neighbouring property with whom we share a common boundary. We've been friendly towards Mr. Norman and his family since they moved in, and we discussed our concerns about the application with them prior to putting in our objection. Jasmine Cottage is currently a double garage with flat roof along the shared boundary, which you can see in Image A. Mr. Norman has applied to extend his house and add an annex to this existing garage. See Image B? The proposed plans involve a change of materials and substantial change in the roof line to this existing garage. It would have a nearly 5 metre high black gable wall just inches from our garden fence. This would be extremely overbearing and would block light to the summer house, which we currently benefit from the morning sun and where we enjoy sitting and playing with our 2-year-old daughter. The building would be very visible from our house and garden, and the black wall towering over our land would certainly affect the enjoyment of our garden and house. We're grateful for the parish council's objection and to the ward councillor Sidikar Archwell for calling in the application, as we feel that the planning officer's assessment in this case is wrong and that there are clear grounds for refusal based on this being an overbearing and overshadowing building which would have a detrimental impact on our residential amenity. Image C. Our land is approximately 0.15 acres in yellow, and Jasmine Cottage sits in about 3 acres, including the agricultural land. Image D. Their plans show they intend to make the most of the views across their agricultural land to the rear of the property. The annex is not at the rear and therefore would affect our outlook more than it does the applicants. There are other locations within their curtilage where this building could be located, which wouldn't impact us to the same degree and would still not be in view of their main outlook. In fact, the suggested location is the place that causes the greatest impact to us. Even if it was just turned by 90 degrees, it wouldn't affect us as greatly because the roof would then slope away from the boundary instead of being a gable end wall. Other garages, Image E please, other garages along Hillside Lane have their roofs sloping away from the boundaries to minimise impact on the neighbours. The council's planning policies seek to ensure that new developments do not have an unacceptable adverse impact on adjoining land by reason of being overshadowing or overbearing, policy DM 17 part 7. Policy DM 16 part 1 states that appropriate materials should be used and regard should be had to the appearance of existing buildings and their local context. The proposed materials are out of character for the local area, and in our view, being such a large, conspicuous building due to its height and proximity to our boundary is also out of context in this back garden location. In addition to DM 17 and 16, the high quality places supplementary planning document can also be used to justify refusal. Image F. This proposal is inconsiderate and unreasonable, bearing in mind that the applicant has sufficient other residential land on which the building could be placed. We would ask you to think about how this would affect you and your enjoyment of your own property if it was happening to you. Thank you.
Would you just like to wait a second? Do members have any questions of our speaker, Mr. Wallen? Councillor Edwards.
Yes, just one matter of clarification. I think we heard from the case officer the figure of 4 meters as height. You've referred to 5 meters. I just wonder if we have an accurate figure.
Sure, I said just under 5 meters, 4.9, I believe. Cameron has measured it off the plans from.
Thank you very much.
Just to clarify, yes, that's correct. It is approximately 4.9 meters.
Probably my mishearing of your 0.9 then. So,
Thank you, Chair.
thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Gordon-Smith.
The idea has been mooted.
Councillor Gordon-Smith, could you use a microphone, please?
Yes. The idea has been mooted to have a hit end to it. Would that, in your opinion, make it more acceptable?
I think it would certainly reduce the overbearing nature of the gable end wall.
Any more questions? Thank you very much. You may return to your seat. We now have a parish council representative, Councillor Eric Bodger. Yes, Councillor Bodger, if you'd like to come forward, you will have 3 minutes when you start speaking.
I'd be grateful if you would leave the picture up there. I'm Eric Bodger, Chair of Coatbridge Parish Council. The council objected to this proposal only for the design of the annex, though not to the principle of the application nor to the detail of the house. We saw the design of the annex as causing unnecessary impact on neighbours' enjoyment of their property, in particular contraventions of policy DM 16, paragraph 6.4.32. Interference with ambient light. The proposed gable end is 4.9 metres high and very close to the Garden of 6 Hillside. It'll cut out sunlight from much of their garden, including the summer house. Coatbridge Parish Council noted that an alternative design, such as a hipped roof, would alleviate this problem. An alternative orientation of the building would achieve the same benefit, as well as making the garage more directly accessible. Visual intrusion. The choice of a very dark finish increases the oppressive and overbearing impact of the high gable and is not visible to the applicant. The effect is limited solely to the neighbours. The updated plans exacerbate these problems by proposing a high bamboo barrier that would extend interference with light and visual intrusion over more of the mutual boundary. The fact that the applicant submitted amended plans demonstrates acceptance on their part that the design would cause some harm to the neighbouring property. The updated plan gives a misleading impression that there's sufficient space for a hedge between the boundary and the annex. The footprint of the annex is comparable with that of the main house. Committee may feel that this amounts to overdevelopment of the site. None of the 17 supporting comments raised during the consultation period came from supporters in Hampshire. A later comment from local residents supported the development in principle, as does the parish council. Our objection is only to the overbearing gable and excessively high bamboo barrier. We therefore ask that the committee place more weight on the detailed objections of the parish council and of the immediate neighbour, and add perhaps a condition to prevent the high gable on the boundary by a minor redesign. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. If you'd just like to just wait a second. Members, do we have any questions for the member of the parish council, chairman of the parish council? No, thank you very much indeed. You may return to your seat. Thank you. And our final contributor is the supporter, Adam Knibb. And I believe you have a presentation as well, Mr. Knibb. Okay, you have 3 minutes when you start speaking. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. My name's Adam Knibb, Director of Adam Knibb Architects, a Winchester-based award-winning practice and architect on the project. Our proposal for Jasmine Cottage has been submitted for refurbishment and extension of the house. Both have received case officer approval, which was determined after a full drawing review and site visit. The existing house, as you can see, is at the end of a shared access road and is not overlooked. The proposal is to upgrade the piecemeal existing building and rundown garage into a uniform, cohesive vision of contemporary, well-designed architecture. There's no single typology in the area, so the contemporary design sits as a reflection of an architecture of this time. We've worked with the planning department to make best use of the site and views without creating overlooking. This vision was supported by the case officer. The materials were made to complement the existing building, but in a modern approach, with the dark timber to the annex actually blending into the backdrop of the trees. It would seem that the contentious part of the application is the garage annex. The application has been called in, citing overshadowing and overbearing to the summer house. The annex was developed to provide additional space, working zones, and accommodation to assist with the young family. As you've heard, the pre-app submission was submitted with a positive feedback and considered it in its context an annex building of this size as acceptable. The garage footprint is existing. We considered our proposal should run adjacent to the boundary or away, and felt that design would be of much less impact to neighbour with a slim gable end rather than running down the boundary, creating an increased disruption. Slide 2, please. The sun shading studies have been completed by an external digital survey company, the data taken directly from site, and shows there's no impact through the day in the summer and winter time. Slide 3. Moving on to overbearing, the image you've seen is previously not accurate and does not demonstrate what is currently on the site. What is currently present is a large fence with high foliage, which is well established and will remain between the garage and fence. Slide 4, please. Our proposal ensures that eaves height are low to provide a reduced centre scale. The eave sits below the eaves of the annex sit below the existing garage ridge and summer house ridge, and the proposed annex ridge is just 1 metre above the existing hedgerow, as shown in the corrected CGI on slide 5, please. So the garden is not impacted and overshadowed during the time in the summer solace or winter. And to sum up, it has case officer approval. It's not at odds with other development in the area. It's not within the conservation area. There are 18 comments in support and only 2 in objection. And it is a high quality, sustainable, modern design, something that has been supported with the case officer in both applications.
Thank you very much. Just within your time, well done. Okay. Questions, members? I'd like to start. Would it cause less of an impact? I think there is definitely an impact on that garden next door. Would it cause less of an impact if that roof was hipped?
In terms of the architecture, it would, yes. There's nothing in the vicinity of Jasmine Cottage in terms of the design that's hipped. There's no other hipped garages, if you've seen on previous slides. And so we'd end up with quite an odd dynamic of visual sort of coherence in that area. It also means that there's no space to use that sort of loft area for storage above the garage. As with once the hip's taken in, it's unusable space there for them.
Members, any other questions to the applicant's representative architect? Councillor Gordon-Smith and then Councillor Pitt.
Just one question. In your image here, you show a hedge. Is it a hedge? Because there's something else about planting a bamboo screen.
Yes, so as you can see on the right hand bottom image, that hedge is existing and sits between the fence and the current garage. That is what we're planning to retain. We've tried to increase that by adding a further site plan to show that there'll be a bamboo hedging across there if they felt that the gable was
So the existing planting is not bamboo.
The existing planting there is not bamboo. There is further bamboo,
okay.
but yeah.
Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to work out the orientation of the building. There's one of the issues we talked about overshadowing. Now, I presume those photographs are taken from the neighbour's garden. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it's the camera therefore must be pointing generally north.
The camera is pointing north. By the looks of that shadow, it is sort of midday-ish, looking at our sun path diagrams we did before. And as you can see, their summer house is already in shadow from their own roof.
Yeah. Now the main building, if I may ask, what I can make out from the information we have, the core of the roof of the building is still exactly the same in your proposal as the original. Is that right? So you're not changing the actual roof itself. You're adding to.
We're sitting over the existing footprint of the garage,
Yeah.
but the roof is currently a flat roof and has now become
I'm
a
talking
pitched.
about the main building itself.
Oh, the main building. Sorry, not the annex. On the main building.
Right.
Yeah, then the main building has been extended at either end
Right.
of the main house.
But you're not changed the actual roof.
The roof remains.
Yeah, that's what I
Yes.
just want to clarify
Yeah,
that
yeah.
point. Thank you very much.
Any more questions of clarification, members? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed. You may return to your seat. If you could just switch off the microphone before you go. Thank you. Right, Cameron, we return to you. Oh, do you have any updates following the public contributions?
No updates, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members, I'll take questions on the whole report. If you'd like to ask Cameron anything. Can I ask, was hipping the roof of the garage considered? It's a material change, isn't it? So it's not really something we could ask for as part of the planning process. We have to agree what is in front of us, don't we?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. So that would constitute a material change of the application. In terms of how this has been considered, as Adam stated, it was considered as a cohesive application, so that the alterations that would take place to the garage would match up with the host dwelling, where they're using intersecting gables. So at this moment in time, we considered that that was an acceptable approach to take.
And you don't consider, in your professional opinion, it's not overbearing or overshadowing of the neighbouring garden?
Thank you, Chair. In our consideration, it's not overbearing. And when we've looked at this, we've considered the distance from what we're calling the key amenity space, which is the immediate rear of the neighbouring dwelling in the patio area, in relation to the position of the garage, and it's sort of a position appearing above the fence there. In terms, we've heard about potentially moving or turning it 90 degrees, which we considered probably would have a greater impact in terms of visible built form. So this was considered the best position for it, and as we say, considering taking it as a whole as a cohesive development, and then the distances from key amenity space, we consider that it isn't an overbearing harm present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I've got another question. So we've updated condition 4. It's on the update sheet to say that at no time the annex shall be occupied as an independent unit of accommodation or used as tourist accommodation. So that does cover Airbnb, doesn't it? So it cannot be used for such types of accommodation.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that is correct.
Councillor Wallace.
There is a comment in the report that a small number of trees require felling to accommodate the development. Can you provide a bit more detail on that and whether the tree officer has reviewed this?
Thank you, Chair. So in consideration, if I just take it back to the presentation, when we're looking within the site, within the rear garden, you can sort of see where it would sit. There are a number of relatively minor trees within the rear garden that it could potentially impact, that potentially could require felling. These trees are not protected by a TPO, and in our assessment don't constitute important trees within the landscape. Therefore, in this case, it's been considered acceptable to remove them if needs be. Thank you.
Okay, I think Mr. Green would like to recommend a landscaping condition. Would you like to explain that, please, Robert?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We saw the visualisation there, and in the architect's speech, talking about the retention of the landscaping. Just for the avoidance of doubt, what I would recommend is that we do add an extra condition. It will be along the lines of prior to the commencement of development on the annex, we request a landscaping plan which shows the retention or additional landscaping, just so that we can have certainty that there is that landscaping shown on the visualisation between the boundaries of the properties.
Yes, and I'm not sure that bamboo would be something that we would necessarily agree with.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That was recommended. I think in the report we mentioned that we haven't conditioned that because as officers we don't believe it's necessary to mitigate. But considering we've got the visualisation with the retention, I think a landscaping condition would be appropriate.
Okay, so I'm proposing that we add a landscaping condition to be agreed in due course as suggested by Robert Green. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Any more questions of our officer? Otherwise, we'll move into debate. A question, Councillor Edwards?
Yes, question, Chair. Yeah, sorry. Could you give us a little bit more information about the scale and nature of the accommodation that is being created within this mixed-use ancillary building?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as we can see from the floor plans, so what's being proposed, so we've got a 1-bedroom in there, and then living space with shower accommodation, and then some space with laundry. We've considered this as just an additional space for a relative. Should be noted during pre-app discussions, the scale actually of the accommodation was reduced to ensure that it was acceptable, and the connectivity with the host dwelling. It's in close proximity, which with annex accommodation we consider important to ensure that further along the line it can't be severed or anything like that. So it appears as part of the site. So it is on the larger side for annex accommodation, but still within the bounds of which I think we would consider to be acceptable. And with the condition that we've asked for condition 4 to limit the use and keep it as an annex and ensure it can't be severed or used as Airbnb or anything like that. The scale is considered acceptable. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? No? So debate. Any debate, any comments? Councillor Pearson, then Councillor Ashwell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know this area reasonably well. I've got to say Hillside is a bit difficult to find, but once you find it, it's clear. The area is characterised actually by large buildings surrounded by tall trees. So I'm a little bit surprised that there are long distance views from any of the buildings along here, because trees and hedges would tend to get in the way. However, I don't know the particular view that the proposer referred to. Going back down to this, it's going to create a larger building, but on a very large site. So any suggestion it might be overdevelopment is really skewered by that point. The sunlight that was mentioned, from what I can make out from the orientation of the maps that Cameron shows us and the architect shows us, the sun would come from the south of this point. So I can't see how the building that's being created, a large building being created, is going to overshadow its neighbour, because the sun is in the wrong direction. So that one I would throw out. Access is an issue, but it's an existing access. It's a narrow lane going Hillside is, and really highways has nothing to contribute regarding the access from the main road, because it exists and the houses along here are very aware of what the situation is like. I would like to thank Cameron again. Perhaps a bit boring about this, but it's got a succinct to the point report here, which I like. It's detailed where it needs to be, it's brief where it doesn't need to be. Good one, Cameron. I like that. I sometimes wish we could have a praise writer when we look at this report. But the other comment I would say is second paragraph in the principal development, Kirkridge doesn't have a development boundary. This is MTRA4 countryside. And you've got to take that into account. Any suggestion of development boundary doesn't exist in Kirkridge. It doesn't have one. It's a disseminated settlement. Simple as that. I used to live in Kirkridge, just actually down the road from actually this site. But thank you, Cameron. I agree with what you said.
Thank you. Councillor Ashwell.
Thank you. Like Councillor Pearson, I also know the area, as it's in my ward. I just find it difficult that 17 people that are supporting the application live nowhere in Hampshire. They're all from around the country. I have no objections to the change to the property, but the actual annex I'm struggling with. I do find it will be very overbearing for the people next door living in number 5. So I won't be supporting the application.
Okay, thank you. Any other contributions? Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I can see no reason to object to the building itself. The existing one is a bit of a jumble and of no great age, and the actual proposed design is pretty good. But I do find it slightly hard to cope with this very large annex. And Cameron said it had been reduced in size, but I don't know if it was before, but it's about 17 metres long and 6.5 wide. That's a big chunk of building. And I do question why it has to be put so close to the boundary when it is a big site. And one final comment is I'd be extremely wary of planting bamboo there, because bamboo goes everywhere. It'll be in your neighbour's garden before, for a year's gone by. I don't think I can support it with the garage in its present position.
Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. I hark on what Councillor Gordon Smith has said and agree with him. I think this is the house is, I have no problem with whatsoever. I think it conforms to everything that we would ask. It's the extension of the annex is really overbearing and really quite large building. So I can't see how we can support that.
All right. I don't think any of us have got any disagreement with the proposals for the main house. I think the reason they put the garage where they're proposing to put it, annex, is because that's where the existing garage is. I think we've seen from the shadowing diagrams and the fact that it is north of the garden, that actually it will not overshadow the garden. It might be visible from and initially overbearing. I don't think that, and I agree with our officer, I don't think that is sufficient harm to turn down the whole application. There's always in planning matters, you always have to have a balance between allowing development, reasonable development, and considering the neighbours. And I do think that this is a difficult balance, but I do think that we have to go on the side of our case officer, who's professionally assessed this and does not consider, particularly with the new conditions about landscaping and so on, that it will be overbearing and certainly is not overshadowing. Although it will be visible and initially, obviously, like all new buildings, the neighbours will be aware of it. However, you know, we have to take that into consideration. We have to consider whether that is a sufficient consideration to turn down the whole application. The applicants would not consider hipping the roof. That's their prerogative. That might have swung more of you in favour of the application. They would not consider moving it slightly away from the boundary. Again, that might have improved the views of members of the committee, either of which could still happen, and would certainly improve the relations between the neighbours. So, is that the end of debate? No, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Again, with everyone else, I have no objections or problems with the main building at all. However, I do find the annex offensive. In fact, I find it visually offensive. I think its bulk, its size, its colour and its mass are overbearing in terms of the amenity value of the neighbour, so I will not be supporting it.
Right, we now come to the decision, if there's no more contributions to debate. So this application is recommended for approval. Can I see all those in favour of approval, please? That's 3 members. And those against? 6, I think. Yeah, okay. So we now need to find some planning reasons for our decision, members. Would you like to come up with some planning reasons? Perhaps we could ask our officers if they'd like to suggest a few.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Listening to the comments made in the debate there, I think what I'm hearing is that we don't have any issues with the dwelling itself. So this is just focused on the annex. And I think it's more, and correct me if I'm wrong, to do with an overbearing impact rather than an overshadowing impact. So what I would recommend, and I've just made a draft of the reason here, is as a result of the scale, positioning and relationship with the neighbouring boundary of the annex building, the proposal results in an adverse overbearing impact on the residential amenity of 6 Hillside. The proposal is therefore contrary to policy DM17 of the local plan part 2. So that would be my recommendation, and then the Chair and I can take the final wording of that.
Any further planning reasons, members, you'd like to add to that? No? Does that sufficiently cover your concerns? It does. All right, so following that then, given that reason for refusal, can I see all those in favour of refusing this application, please? 6 members, and those against? 3. So that application is refused. We'll now take a short break for coffee, etc. Return at 5 to 11. Thank you. Okay, welcome back to today's planning committee. I hope you've all seen the signs about live streaming and all the rest of it. I won't say it again. So we now move to item number 8 on our agendas, and this is Meadows Farm, Irvilles Road at the end of the world. I mean, sorry, World's End. Okay, and our officer presenting is Liz Young. Liz, if you'd like to give us your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a change of use of part of the ground floor area of an existing barn from agriculture to storage and distribution, because that's use class B8. Just moving to the first slide, here we have the site location plan at the top left and the site layout plan to the bottom right. You can see the application site is marked by the red line. It's confined to quite a small area of the existing barn and relates to the ground floor only. The blue line you can see shows the wider area of ownership, the applicant's ownership. So the barn itself, just in terms of background, has a sort of overall floor area of approximately 450 square metres. It was originally built under agricultural permitted development around about 2016. Currently, a B1 office use occupies the northwest corner of the building, immediately adjacent to the B8 use we're now looking at. Just to give a bit of background on the B1 use and how it was established, an application was submitted in 2018 to regularise this use. That application went to planning committee, was turned down due to concerns over loss of tranquility, increased vehicle traffic, and impacts on users of the right of way. The applicant then appealed that decision, and then that appeal was allowed. So the main points which led to that appeal being allowed related to the fact that the local and national policies at the time permitted the change of use of agricultural buildings to employment uses. The other points raised by the inspector related to the fact that there was no objection from highways. Additionally, it was noted that the agricultural use itself generated vehicle traffic, but also it was stated that the fact that the permissive policies within the NPPF and also MTRA4 both acknowledged that employment uses typically generate a level of vehicle activity. So the development plan remains unchanged since that earlier decision. Just moving to the next slide. This is the aerial photograph looking towards the application site, which is marked by the yellow star at the centre of the page. It lies in open countryside. It's accessed by an unmade track which runs off Irvilles Road, which is to the southeast. This track is also public right of way and is shared with Meadow Farmhouse, which is the closest neighbouring property to the development, lies about 60 metres to the east. Just put the cursor over so it's about position there. So just moving on to the next slide. Oh, sorry, I meant to point out the red lines you can see are the public rights of way. So that shows the public right of way network. This next slide shows the floor plan, the internal floor plan of the barn. So to the left is the ground floor plan. First floor plan is to the right. You can also see here the previously consented B1 use, which I mentioned. So that use occupies about 180 square metres of floor area, which includes the mezzanine above. This use, the B8 use, occupies approximately 55 square metres, relates to the ground floor only. So just in terms of the use itself, It relates to a tea and coffee distribution company. It doesn't operate outside the hours of 9 to 4, Monday to Friday, and between 9 and 3 on Saturdays. In terms of vehicle movements, it amounts to approximately 1 two-way movement each day, which is quite a bit lower than the current vehicle movements associated with B1 use, which was stated at the time to be about 2 dozen a day. Just move into the next slide. Here we have the elevation. So this is to show the extent of external changes which have been carried out. So at the top of the page is the pre-existing elevation. The bottom is the north elevation as it is now. So as you can see, the alterations have involved the addition of a window and door, which are to the left of the existing openings which serve the B1 use. Concerns have been raised in the third party comments received that the addition of windows and doors was very recently turned down in the case of an agricultural prior approval application. That is the case. The main reason for that was the fact that the openings were not considered necessary for agriculture, as that is the main consideration for agricultural permitted development. The main change now is that this is an application to change the use of the building to storage and non-agricultural storage use. So with this in mind, it's considered that the small scale addition of openings in this case is not considered harmful to the character of the area. This elevation faces in towards the yard area. It's not visible from outside the site. Moving on to the photographs. So this photo is taken looking towards the east elevation of the application building. So that's the view you have from the right of way. The tree you can see on the right is subject to a tree preservation order, along with 2 others further down the track. So this view is taken from the right of way that runs south of the application building. So the application building you can see here on the right behind the wall, again looking towards the east elevation. So this view is looking towards the west elevation, so you can see the yard and parking area in the foreground. This view is towards the north elevation. So you can see, so the canopy and the windows right hand side serve the B1 use, and you can just see the other openings to the left of this. So as I say, this elevation is not visible from existing rights of way. This is the access from Ervil's Road. So this is the track that accesses the application site and Meadow Farmhouse. Ervil's Road itself is a C classified highway. So this slide shows the approach towards the application site as you go north along the track. You can just see Meadow Farmhouse on the right. This is the view looking south, taken from just outside the access to the main yard where the building is. Looking south down the track, you can just see Meadow Farmhouse on the left. This final slide shows the signage which has been agreed with the right-of-way officer. Basically consists of a couple of speed limit signs and a give way sign on the access to the yard, to ensure the safety of users of the right-of-way. Subject to this signage being implemented, the right-of-way officer raises no objections to the development. So just in conclusion, the recommendation is that planning permission should be granted, with conditions limiting the hours of use to those stated on the application, and also limiting it to B8 only. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Now we move to public speaking. We have 3 public speakers, starting with the Parish Council representative, Councillor Kevin Andrioli. Kevin, welcome again. You know the routine. You have 3 minutes, starting when you start speaking. And over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Denby Parish Council objects to this application on several grounds. Firstly, it's Local Plan Part 1 Policy MTRA4, development in the countryside, says expansion or redevelopment of existing buildings to facilitate the expansion on site of established businesses or to meet an operational need will only be permitted if the development is proportional to the nature and scale of the site, its setting and countryside location. The application is contrary to this policy as the site is becoming an industrial multi-use facility and not an agricultural farm. We also have policy DM23, rural character, outside defined settlement boundaries, which this is. Development proposals which accord with the development plan will be permitted, where they do not have an unacceptable effect on the rural character of the area by means of visual intrusion, introduction of incongruous features, the destruction of locally characteristic rural assets, or by impacts on the tranquility of the environment. The application is contrary to the policy as the rural character of the site of the area is compromised by the presence of a large multi-use industrial site. There is regular industrial vehicle movement along country lanes and farm tracks not suitable for heavy goods vehicles. There have been many TPO trees along the lane for which applications to cut them back have been made in order for heavy goods vehicles to pass. And the whole area is by negative impact of development being destroyed. The business is not an agricultural business, and the barn is not being used for agricultural purposes. A tea distribution company is currently using the barn for industrial distribution purposes and intends to continue to do so, as stated in the application. Permission was granted for agricultural equipment storage in the ground floor of this building and not for industrial distribution purposes. The buildings on site are deliberately not being used for their intended purpose, and use class B8 is being utilised in this application to change the use of the building without a full planning application to change of use. The application is in effect a change of use from agricultural building to an industrial distribution building, i.e. a warehouse. A newly built agricultural barn on the farm has just been changed to mixed use under prior notification, so another warehouse. Denby Parish Council requests you refuse this application. Thank you.
Very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for the Parish Councillor? No? Okay, thank you very much. You may return to your seat, Councillor Andrioli. Now we have the Ward Councillor, Councillor Paula Langford-Smith. If you'd like to come forward, Paula. You have 5 minutes when you start speaking. The floor is yours. Thank you.
I ask you to picture a beautiful water meadow in the heart of the Forest of Beer, part of an ancient woodland. There's a little public footpath, part of the King's Way, which is used to herd the cattle over the stream that runs through the water meadow. You pass over a beautiful Victorian brick bridge which saves you fording the stream. Tranquil paths and tracks crisscross this ancient landscape, enjoyed by people for decades. The landscape was so prized that Meadows Farm was listed in the Hampshire Treasury's valued landscapes. Just 10 years ago, Meadows Farm was described as I've just said. It had 2 open barns with corrugated roofs for straw. However, the last 10 years have seen the cumulative effect of significant development, not of an agricultural nature, but of many businesses slowly locating there, none of which are farming activities, despite much of the planning being granted under agricultural prior notification, including the barns. The barns were needed to expand the farming business, and one application was said to be almost identical to the barn it was replacing, which was 50 square metres. It was replaced with a 240 metre square barn. This small barn was to be constructed of a farm-type material with fibre cement roof and horizontal shiplap cladding, designed in a manner fitting with the surroundings and typical of a modern agricultural building. You've got a picture of the barn that was actually built. It was built in modern house bricks with domestic double-glazed windows and doors. The barns have never been used for agricultural storage. There was subsequently an application to turn that barn into a dwelling because the barn was surplus to the farming requirements. This was refused by the inspector, and instead the owner relocated his motorway maintenance company there, pouring many, many tons of concrete on the green fields to create the hard standings that you can see in the photographs that you have before you. And subsequently, they applied for retrospective change of use for the barn to offices and agricultural storage. They then needed a further barn, apparently for agricultural business. Extensive works have taken place at this site over the years. The Victorian Bridge was demolished to enable weight-bearing heavy goods lorries. The track owned by the house to the right of Meadows Farm has been widened to be a road with no planning permission. GPOs, trees on the track have been cut to allow passage beneath, despite applications stating that the lower entrance would be used for deliveries. Concern has been expressed by Hampshire County Council over the amount of concrete which has been laid, many thousands of tonnes without permission. Many residents have continually registered their concerns with both the city and the parish councils. Hundreds of photos have been taken with regards to the development of the site, and the enforcement team are fully aware. Over the years, several applications have been submitted for additional barns across the farm, each claiming for agricultural use. There have been 21 planning applications or prior notification for agricultural change of use on this site since 2014. 21 applications. The latest is not this application, but yet another change of use via prior notification for the newest barn to be changed to flexible use. The farm has changed over the years from agricultural to storage, and the general use of the land is for livery, but again, there has been no change of use applied for or granted. The farm is building under one permitted use and then immediately notifying of change of use of the farm buildings to a use that would not normally be permitted. The reuse is supposed to be for disused farm buildings. It's highly likely that an application for an industrial unit in a water meadow would be refused. The application you have before you is for a tea distribution company, an application effectively to turn a barn in a water meadow into an industrial warehouse. This application will cause additional heavy goods vehicle movements and staff driving to the facility because there is no public transport. In the interests of the community of this hamlet, I ask you to please refuse this application and stop this farm turning into an industrial estate. It is not in a sustainable or desirable location for such a business. I respectfully request that planning committee members visit the site, as many members may not be familiar with the area, and this will enable you to establish for yourself the actual use of this farm. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Councillor Langford-Smith. You could just wait and see if the members have any questions of clarification. No? Thank you very much. You may return to your seat, please. Switch the mic off. Thank you. Next, we have the supporter, Councillor Robert Tatton. Not Councillor, I'm sorry, Robert Tatton. Is he not here? Oh, yes, yes. Come forward, Robert. You know the routine. And you have 3 minutes once you start speaking. Don't forget your microphone.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to present this deputation in favour of my client's proposal and the officer's positive recommendation. Permission is sought for continued use of the northwest ground floor corner of an existing barn for the storage and distribution of tea. One container load is delivered every 3 months, and the tea is redistributed via Royal Mail or a courier van once a day. Access is gained by a gravel track 4.2 metres wide. It forms part of a public right-of-way, but a metre-wide grass verge affords refuge for the occasional passing pedestrian. This business use has operated for over a year, but no complaints or incidents have been reported. To support a prosperous rural economy, Section 84 of the NPPF calls for the growth and expansion of all types of business in rural areas. And Section 85 recognises that to meet local business and community needs, some uses may have to be accommodated outside existing settlements. They should be sensitive to their surroundings and not have an unacceptable impact on local roads. The use of previously developed land is encouraged. In similar vein, policy MTRA 4 of your council's adopted core strategy provides for a small-scale business use in the countryside that is, and I quote, appropriate to the site, location and the setting, and does not cause harm to the character and landscape of the area or neighbouring uses or create inappropriate noise, light and traffic generation. Those requirements, in my view, are met in this case. The highway, rights of way and environmental protection authorities have all been consulted and none have objected. Chair, I've revisited the application site since the officer's report was published and exercised my judgment in the manner prescribed by the development plan and the NPPF. The modesty of this business use is striking, and I have found none of the matters raised by objectors to be of such moment as to justify refusal of planning permission. In view of the positive presumption generated by the development plan, the officers are right to conclude that permission should be granted, so members are requested to accept that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for Mr. Tutton? Councillor Pearson.
Good morning, Mr. Sutton. I was just looking at the planning history of the site, and nowhere in there, and you haven't mentioned it, the access track is a right of way. So if we are minded to grant your application, who is responsible for maintaining that track?
The existing owners.
The existing owners, which will not be yourself, not you personally, but your applicant.
I'm not aware of the ins and outs of the
Right.
ownership situation from that perspective.
Right.
But I would expect my client to be partially responsible,
Sure.
as he owns land immediately adjoining the access track.
Thank you, Mr. Tutton. Perhaps the case officer will be able to illuminate that point. It's an existing building, as you rightly say. The photographs certainly imply that, which has been slightly enlarged recently. Are you arguing that this is farm diversification to support this application?
No.
No. It's just use of an existing building, full stop.
Yes.
Okay, thanks very much.
I think the NPPF was quoted, which encourages business development where appropriate in the countryside. Is that right? Yes. Okay. We can ask our officer about that. Any more questions of clarification? No. Many thanks, Mr. Tutton. You may return to your seat. Liz, did you want to cover anything following the public contributions?
Yeah, on the issue of the access track, in terms of who's responsible for it, that's not directly a planning consideration. It's more of a civil issue, from my understanding. That would remain unchanged. You know, it wouldn't be affected by this development.
Yes, we'll move now to questions to the officer. Yes. Yes.
Usually rights of way department maintains rights of way footpaths, but this is more than a footpath, isn't it? It's an access track, an old farm track. Are we suggesting that it's Hampshire as rights of way people are responsible for maintaining this track, which Mr. Tutton has said is what, just over 4 metres wide.
I wouldn't have the information as to whose responsibility it is, but the right of way officer is a consultee on the application because the impact the development has on the track is relevant. But that is why they've been consulted. In terms of who the responsibility lies with, in terms of the day-to-day maintenance, that's kind of a separate consideration to the impacts directly associated with this application, which is what we seek view from the right of way officer on.
Yeah, well, that's the.
So yeah, we have
That's why I
some
asked the
view on
question.
that. So
I mean, there's a complex of buildings here. Are they all under one ownership? Or are they all separate owners?
well, the blue line you can see on the location plan shows the extent of the ownership.
Yeah.
So there are other buildings. So you can see the buildings to the south,
Right.
also fall within the same ownership.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. So if I could just remind members, we are talking about the application site, which is the red line on the map and nothing else. We're not considering acres of concrete or any other elements of this sort. Okay, no questions? Really an excellent report. Thank you, Liz. Let's move to debate then. Is there any debate? Councillor Wallace.
So unfortunately, I have to bow to the chair on this, and that she made a very good point that that this committee is only empowered to consider a specific application before us today, and as such, I see no objection to moving forward with it. Whilst I do have a lot of sympathy for parish council and the ward councillors' comments and position, unfortunately, I think we are limited to judging just on the immediate application that's before us. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Can I also point out that the hours of use, which are quite restricted, actually are covered by condition 2 in our report, and hopefully that will reassure local people that there wouldn't be any more transport required other than normal during working hours. Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I have I'm not sure whether it's the advantage or disadvantage of having visited this site on a previous planning application, which I will try to push out of my mind. But I think this is rather a case of thin end of the wedge, and I don't think I can support it.
You will need planning reasons not to support it, Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Well, I think MTRA 4 is quite a good reason to object to it.
Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got to say this application puzzled me a little bit. You're looking at the planning history, can only be described as a little checkered as to what actually was approved and what not. I'm assuming that it was built originally as an agricultural building, and therefore there must be a farm close by. If that's the case, then clearly it's an existing building which has recently been modified according to Liz's reports there. I noticed the profiles are slightly different in both cases, plus of course doors and windows. The issue rises, of course, if it was a farm building, then it is a question to a degree of diversification of agricultural buildings. Not quite sure what the agricultural status is. Clearly the application suggests it's moving on from that. There's an office within this building, therefore drainage utility aspects become relevant. How are waste products from that office? Presumably there will be toilets, wash basin there as a result of the Office of Factory and Office Act, I think it is, which suggests that those facilities should be in a building that has offices in it. In which case, as say, the drainage and utilities issue becomes relevant, which from what your report suggests, you are expecting a report on that, or to confirm that and how the waste product is being disposed of. As far as storage is concerned, I have no objection to that, whether it's agricultural or industrial or documentation when it comes to that. It's not unusual to have buildings in the countryside used for that purpose. The access situation worries me a little bit. It is a right of way, but no one, for what response I've got, seems to be responsible for maintaining that right of way. So I'm forced to conclude, like all rights of way, it's a county matter rather than ourselves, which begs a question: will they continue to maintain it? Will it continue to be a right of way if there's more traffic, vehicle traffic, using this lane rather than just a footway or cycleway or horse, I presume, rights of way with multiple uses in the countryside? But if these questions seem to be answered in here, I'm not convinced, but they seem to be answered in here. I mean, if that's the case, I mean, I accept your recommendation list, albeit a little reluctantly. There seems to be so many questions that are unanswered.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Any more debate? Can I just, before I call you in, Councillor Ling, if I could just quote on page 96. The National Planning, what does PPF stand for? Policy Framework. So the overarching policy from government that we have to operate under states that planning decisions should enable the sustainable growth and expansion of all types of businesses in rural areas, both through the conversion of existing buildings and well-designed new buildings. Okay. So we are looking at the NPPF as the overriding policy, which is supporting this, I think, as well as our own local policy. So, okay, Councillor Laming, did you have a contribution to debate?
Yes, thank you. The more I listen to my colleagues, the more questions come up in my mind. Has this ever been used as an agricultural building? And if so, when was it built?
I'm not sure that that's relevant to this discussion, Councillor Laming.
It is, because we're converting a building from agricultural use to other uses, and converting it to storage. So I'm just asking the question on that. That appears to me to be a major question in my mind. We all like to support businesses in the countryside, so I'm really confused on this one.
Okay, no more debate. We will move to the decision. This application is recommended for approval. Can I see all those in favour of approval, please? And those against? 1. And abstentions? 2. So that application is approved. We will now have a short break whilst we change officers. Thank you. Okay, lovely. We're now moving to item number 9 on our agendas, which is at 2 Woodlands Drove Main Road in Twyford Moors. Our officer presenting is Nicola van Wonnick. Welcome, Nicola. If you'd like to give us your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application we are discussing relates to 2 Woodland Drove, which is located in the village of Twyford within the South Downs National Park. A brief history of the site is that it was allowed at appeal as part of a redevelopment approved in 2004, which was for the area here. It was for the redevelopment and erection of 2 semi-detached dwellings and 2 detached dwellings here. The current application we have before us relates to this site here, indicated by the star. Planning permission is sought for the demolition of the existing rear conservatory and construction of a new single-storey rear extension, the conversion and extension of the existing garage to habitable accommodation. This is the site location plan here, the site being indicated by the red line, Woodland Drove here, which is access off Main Road here. This first slide is the front elevation of the existing dwelling. As you can see, it's part of a semi-detached pair. This is currently a 2-bedroomed, 2-storey semi-detached with an adjoining garage shown on the side here. Here is the semi-detached pair. This is number 1 Woodland Drove on the left. And I think it's important to note that as you can see from the photograph, that due to the sort of topography of the area, the road slopes up to the east, which means that each property is a slightly different level to their adjoining or neighbour. Here's number 1 Woodland Drove here, and the property to the east is Springfield, which is located here. Here's some views taken from Woodland Drove. The view on the left is looking down towards Main Road, and the view on the right is going up towards the rest of Woodland Drove. The actual development is majority of the development is actually contained most of the rear of the property. As existing, the property features a rear extension, rear conservatory, and here as shown is the rear of the existing garage. Another view of the existing conservatory, which will be demolished. Here's a more slightly more contextual view. So looking at the rear elevation of the property, so you can clearly see the existing conservatory, the existing integral garage, and the side elevation of the neighbouring property looking east, which is Springfield. Similar view looking west is to the rear elevation of number 1 Woodland Drove. The next slide actually shows the proposed floor plans. The development is limited to the ground floor. Here we have the proposed ground floor plan and a first floor plan, which is actually indicating sort of whether the proposed roof line will change. As existing, shown, I don't know if you can see, it's a very sort of dotted red line. It's the existing conservatories here. So that will be demolished, and the proposal is for a single-storey rear extension. To the rear of the existing garage, that will be extended by approximately 0.6 meters. So that will be extended. It's probably clearer to show on the floor or the roof plan here. This is a modest extension to the existing garage, a single-storey extension here, and it will be linked together here. So probably might be easier to show. So here we have the floor plans, sorry, the roof plan, showing there'll be 2 roof lights proposed in the existing garage, one on the new roof slopes, and one here in the rear extension that will replace the conservatory. Show the development in the form of elevations. Here is the front elevation. The only change to the front elevation would be the replacement of the existing garage door, replacement with a new white UPVC window. To the rear elevation, the existing garage and roof line would remain the same, which is going to be extended so to allow the conversion of the garage to become habitable accommodation. So the roof line will be extended at the same pitch as existing, and then we have the single-storey extension here, which replaces the existing conservatory. Materials would be to match the existing dwelling and terms, and then the use of a green oak frame, which would be left to weather naturally. And this is just on the rear part of the fenestration to the new extension. Turning to the side elevations, so this will be the view looking at it from the east, from where Springfield is the neighbour, slightly higher than the application site. 2 obscurely glazed windows are proposed to the side of the existing garage, with 2 roof lights proposed to the roof slope. The extent of the extension is shown here, and slightly different colour of the roof there. So that's just showing where the extension, how far the garage is going to be extended. And then this is the view from the west. So this will be the view from 1 Woodland Drove, and there's no new fenestration proposed on that side of the extension. To conclude, the proposed development is not considered to significantly be harmful to the character and appearance of the local area or the South Downs National Park, and complies with the policy requirements of SD4, SD5 and SD31 of the South Downs Local Plan. Development would not result in a detrimental impact on the amenities of neighbouring properties in terms of loss of light, privacy or overbearing impacts. For these reasons, the application is therefore recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. We now move to our public contributions. First of all, we have an objector, Richard Pennell. If you'd like to come forward, Mr. Pennell. You have 3 minutes and the time will start when you start speaking. If you could just switch on the microphone.
Good morning, my name is Richard Pennell. I'm the neighbour at number 1 Woodland Drove. Springfield couldn't make it due to an oncology appointment, I'm afraid. I aim to demonstrate this application is to the benefit of one and to the detriment of the majority. It is opposed by all adjacent properties and contravenes conditions stated by the Planning Inspectorate and would demonstrate disregard and lack of consistency for the council's own findings. The original planning application included 2 Woodland Drove as a 3-bedroom property, but was rejected by Winchester Council. It was granted on appeal as a 2-bedroom property by the Planning Inspectorate with the following conditions cited under section 17 of that appeal decision. I quote, "It has already reached the limit of acceptability in terms of the number of dwellings and site coverage. 2 houses of that development have since experienced flood issues, supporting the original inspectorate's concerns about site coverage. The proposal increases site coverage and could exacerbate those issues to the detriment of those homeowners." Contrary to the statement made in, it said that the conversion of the roof space is speculative. I can inform you that it is not speculative. I have been inside the property on multiple occasions under previous ownership and can categorically state that the loft has been converted and was used as a bedroom, studio, office. There was or is a staircase in the rear bedroom allowing access to that roof space, which may or may not have been removed and can easily be re-established if it has. The space has been lined, insulated, boarded to a habitable standard. This is supported by the 2 Velux windows, as can be seen from the rear elevation photograph supplied by the applicant. You don't fit Velux windows for storage. This will increase the percentage of expansion calculation greatly to in excess of 30%. Now, moving on to planning rule SD27 is to protect the limited supply of smaller properties within the national park, an issue we've heard about earlier about smaller properties. A concern highlighted by the Inspectorate and Winchester Director of Development Services. Winchester's original planning objections to 2 Woodland Drove as a 3-bedroom property states, I quote under section 3 of that, "The proposal fails to provide for a mix of housing types and sizes in accordance with the local development plan. Ultimately, approval was granted on appeal for a 2-bedroom property only. This proposal breaches SD27. The Planning Inspectorate also set conditions under section 19 and section 4. The garages and parking spaces need to be retained, unobstructed and available for parking. This proposal breaches these conditions. This application is to the detriment of the majority and increases flood risk. It contravenes conditions stated by the Planning Inspectorate. Approval would demonstrate disregard and lack of consistency with the council's own findings, and it exceeds the expansion percentage."
I'm afraid you've run out of time now.
Thank you
but
for your
Thank you
time.
very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for Mr. Pennell? Can I just ask about the point about the roof space? So our officer and our plans don't show a room or staircase up to the roof space. But you're telling me that it's there and we can all see the deluxe windows on our photographs. And did you say you'd been in there and seen it?
Yes, I have on the previous ownership, yeah. It was used as a studio predominantly, but there was stairs there.
Right, okay, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. You say that there's been a footprint increase exceeding 30%. Is that including or excluding the existing conservatory?
That's excluding the existing, so that's from the original. So the proposal will increase it more than 30% is what I'm saying. So when you make that calculation, it's based on the original house as it was originally built, and that's without the conservatory.
So basically, with the conservatory taken into account, what would be the percentage increase in the footprint?
Conservatory would be considered part of the increase. So the replacement of the conservatory is actually bigger. It's bigger than the current footprint. So when you take the existing building, which would be before the conservatory, and then you add on the proposal, then it'd be greater than 30%.
So basically, therefore, if you take into account the demolition of the conservatory and the ground floor extension, there's no perceptible increase.
There is a perceptible increase, yeah, but the calculation or the legislation is based on the expansion from the original construction, not the current construction. And it's questionable whether the garage would be included in that percentage, because I believe it's based on habitable space. A garage isn't habitable.
Well, it's an integral garage, so it is included, and that's the way that we do these calculations. But thank you. Thank you. Any more questions of clarification for our? Thank you very much, Mr. Pennell. You may return to your seat. We now have the ward councillor, Councillor Susan Cook. Susan, you have 5 minutes. As you know the routine, so I'll leave you up. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Madam Chair, fellow councillors, officers and members of the general public. Thank you for allowing me to speak concerning this application in Twyford, known as Twyford Moors. What we have before us, as we've heard, the proposal states demolition of an existing rear conservatory, construction of a new single-storey rear extension, conversion and extension of an existing garage to habitable accommodation. Taking into account the Twyford Neighbourhood Plan and the South Downs National Plan policy should be denied as it appears not to meet certain policies. To name a few, out of character, loss of privacy, loss of light, increase in noise and disturbance to both residents either side of the applicant and behind. The proposed application is overbearing of its design form. It would be detrimental to the amenity of nearby neighbours. It would make it, as its proposed layout and size, and the rural location and the purpose of why it was built originally as a starter home, 2 bedrooms. I myself, to the previous applicant, actually did visit this property, and there is a staircase there. There are Velux windows, which makes it, could be a 3 bedroom. So here we are now talking about a possible 4th. This plan will have sufficient windows that could be opened, creating noise and light in less than 2 meters away from one of the properties to the right. As said, it started as a 2 bedroom home. Does not the SD31 policy state a limit of 30%? I'm assuming that, maybe I shouldn't assume, that you have already counted the garage as habitable. How can this be? It's currently a garage, but I can hear what Madam Chair has just referred to. The increased height of the proposed new bedroom is significantly higher, and that the current conservatory, and this would surely be overbearing for what is deemed as a 2 bedroom plot. Twyford local plan refers to the policy NH1 local housing needs. This is also supported by the SDNP ST27 to protect the limited supply of smaller properties within the national park. I do recall that the parish council in fact did not object, although there were concerns of this 30% limitation of household extensions. And in addition, they wanted to make sure that frosted glasses was used as a condition in the original application. There have been questions raised in the objections as to the calculation that's been made, reference the 30%, which we have heard about. When the 4 houses were built, originally after a long period of appeal, I believe section 19 stated the garages and parking spaces should be retained so that cars can be accommodated within their site, not, and I say the word not, on the track. And here we are with an application that wishes to extend the use of the garage as a kitchen. Number one sits lower than number 2, as we've seen from the photographs today. And the increase of this building would be overshadowing and overbearing. Sadly, the change to the roof of number 2 will affect the enjoyment of number 1, his owner, and no doubt its value. It does rather seem to the rights of the new owner to use their land as they wish, exceed the rights of others to enjoy their homes. No wonder, with the percentage of extra shadowing and detrimental one has to suffer before the detriment is sufficiently severe to restrict the rights of a new neighbour who bought the house as it was when it was status quo. I also understand that in the planning officer's report there was no objections in terms of design and appearance, but may I please make it known that Mr. Pennell, the resident, the neighbour who lives at number 1, did object under section 7 of his email that was dated the 10th of February. Planning Rule SD31 states proposals are to be of a high standard of design. It has not been designed in a sympathetic way to minimise overshadowing and light deprivation, or provide an aesthetic complement to the existing style. The planning officer also states to warrant a refusal, what is acceptable? How is this measured? How much light is actually lost? Where are we with this calculation? These houses were built with block and beam construction, and it acts as a resonant chamber which amplifies noise. Increased bedrooms, you'll have increased noise. On all the above, I sit here before you today as a committee. I believe you have a responsibility to ensure, be it one home or a number of homes or changes to an existing home, to enhance the environment for the majority, in particular the neighbours as well. Clearly this proposal is, in its current application state, none of those. I'm asking you as a committee to refuse this application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Sue. Just slightly over your time. Well done. Okay, members, do we have any questions or clarification for Councillor Cook? No. Thank you. That's very thorough. Thank you, Sue. You may return to your seat. And finally, we have the supporter, Andy Partridge. If you'd like to come forward. Thank you. You have 3 minutes once you start speaking, and you know the microphone is switched on with the button. Thank you. That's fine. Thank you.
I'm Andy Partridge of Southern Planning Practice, one of the directors. I act for the applicant, Mrs. Hibbs, who unfortunately cannot be here today. In the first instance, I would like to clarify the attic because there has been some misinformation. We have just now sent some photographs to the case officer and to Rob Green, which clearly show there is no staircase, there is a hatch. As far as we're concerned, that accommodation is not habitable, and client who is nearing retirement suffers from asthma. She wants to provide a bedroom on the ground floor and a wet room, so all the key living accommodation is on the ground floor. In terms of the actual increase in the built form of what exists now, the changes are small. The proposal only adds an extra 5.6 metres squared to the property. The proposal replaces an existing conservatory, which you see, with a bedroom, getting rid of the side windows in the conservatory facing the neighbours. It extends the rear garage by 0.6 metres and it creates an extension between the two. The additions are therefore small and are well within the 30% tolerance on extensions. It therefore accords with the policy on extensions HN4 of the Twyford Plan and SD31 of the South Downs Plan. The changes are mostly at the rear of the property, as you've seen, but at the front, the garage door replaced with a window where it's converted to an enlarged kitchen. The overall effect on the character of the property is small. The Highway Authority has confirmed there is still sufficient space on site for parking following the conversion of the garage. It's considered that the neighbouring properties will not be materially affected. The neighbour to the east is set at a higher level, largely overlooks the garage roof. This view will not significantly change, nor would there be overlooking with roof lights being at high level, and the ground floor windows are going to be obscured. There is also a close boarded fence separating the property which would block views from the windows in any event. The conservatory already sits alongside the boundary of the neighbour to the west, and its replacement with a single bedroom will not compromise the amenities of the neighbours. As to noise disturbance, this is a small extension to a residence. Therefore, having regard to its character and use, it is unlikely to cause noise and disturbance. I can confirm that my client is agreeable to the conditions in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sticking within your 3 minutes. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for Mr. Partridge? Thank you very much for clarifying some of the queries that were raised earlier. Thank you. Okay, members. Nicola, do you have anything else to add following the public contributions?
Yes, if I may, Chair, thank you. I'd like to provide some further clarification regarding how its development complies with policy SD31 of the South Downs National Park Local Plan. The existing integral garage is included within the existing floor space calculations. Excuse me, as the property was originally built with the integral garage in 2004. This is the consistent approach that we have taken with integral garages that existed on the 18th of December 2002 or as originally built. I'd also like to just point out that it should also be noted that if the garage was not included within the existing calculations and the percentage increase did exceed 30%, it would still have a gross internal area of under 120 square metres and have 3 bedrooms, and would therefore not result in the loss of a small or medium dwelling as defined by SD31 of the local plan. This is discussed further within the technical advice note for extensions and replacement dwellings, and I will quote what it says. In some cases where an existing dwelling is particularly small, an extension or replacement that exceeds an approximately 30% floor space increase may still ensure that the resultant floor space remains below 120 square metres GIA. In such situations, there would be no loss of a small or medium-sized dwelling, so the proposal would be considered acceptable in terms of percentage floor space increase. Therefore, the proposed development is considered to be compliant with the overarching aims of policy SD31 of the South Downs National Park Local Plan, which is to protect the loss of small and medium-sized dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Right. Any questions for our officer, Councillor Lehman?
We're told on several occasions that we've got to take note of previous inspectors' reports. So I'm a little bit confused on, we don't seem to be taking so much concern on the previous report allowing this. Could you sort of clarify and help me in that?
Certainly. I mean, I think every application is looked at on its own sort of case by case basis, but it also has to be assessed against current policy and guidance through the adoption of the South Downs National Park Local Plan. The appeal decisions are material considerations in determining planning applications. However, we will look at what has been approved, what the conditions were, but that we will assess it all under the current application. So it is considered, but we were applying it to current policy because that's a 2004 application, but it is considered to be compliant against the current policy and local plan guidance.
Thank you.
Councillor Wallace?
Yeah, there were two, further to that, there were two specific issues raised in the in the comments. One was on section 19, it's already reached acceptability. And on section 19, garage needs to retain so that cars can be basically on site. Can you respond to those two specific queries, please?
Sorry, could you just repeat the first one for me, please?
Section 17 was quoted, it's already that the site's already reached capacity.
Yes, certainly. I think with the appeal spectre, obviously the application, the 2003 application was relating to the demolition of the existing garage and obviously the erection of 4 dwellings. So that would be in terms of I think it mentioned in terms of number of dwellings as well as sort of capacity of the site. So I would obviously assume that will relate to the site as a whole and relate in regards to the number of 4 dwellings, and that the site wasn't able to take any more than 4 as presented in that application. That's how that would be interpreted. I don't think that would necessarily mean that you would never be able to extend those properties. I think that would be the assessment we make under the current application, under current guidelines, and what could be achieved by applying the current legislation and policies to the site. With regards to the conversion of the garage, I think that was a condition that was often put on many applications, and again that is reassessed under this current application. We consulted our highways authority because they would be to assess whether they felt that the site as existing with the loss of the garage would still retain a suitable amount of parking. It meets the parking standards. I think it was either 2 parking standards, 2 parking spaces should be available for a 3-bedroom house. Therefore, they had no objection to the proposal as it met current parking standards.
Any further queries for our case officer? No debate? I'll kick things off. I've listened to the concerns of the ward councillor and neighbours, but I do have to agree with our case officer. I think this is a modest extension. It's only a ground floor extension. Any overlooking is dealt with either through the boundary treatment or including the obscuration of the windows. So their obscure glass can't be looked through either way. We're looking at an existing owner who simply wants to enable her to stay in her home long term, so single floor living, should that be necessary. And I think that we should respect that and recognise that that is something that we will all have to face in due course. I was pleased to be reassured that the loft space remains a loft space for storage and not another room or indeed a bedroom. Inevitably, I think in a tiny lane, which is what these houses are of, during the construction of this extension, that there will have to be a certain amount of disruption and noise and so on. But I'm sure that the applicant will keep that as far as possible to a minimum. And once the extension is built, I'm sure that everything will settle down very quickly. So I cannot see any planning reasons at all to object to this. And in fact, I think it's, as I say, a modest and well-designed little extension to what is a little house and will remain a little house. Any more contributions to debate, members? No? Okay, this application is recommended for approval. Can I see all those in favour, please? Any against? No, that's all, members. Thank you. So that application is approved. Thank you. Right, we are now at item number 10 on our agendas. This is at 53 Cheriton Road, Winchester. And the officer presenting is John Bartlett. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. This application is with regards to an application to fell a holm oak, mature holm oak tree. This is brought to the committee as per a request from Councillor Westwood. So the tree concerned is situated in the rear garden of 53 Cheriton Road, as is shown on the map. And there's the aerial photo of the tree in the rear garden. In terms of its context within the landscape, it's a prominent feature within the landscape and can be clearly seen above the roof line there. This is a view from Cheriton Road near to the junction of Greenhill Road. And further views from Cheriton Road, and this is from Fordington Avenue and Fordington Avenue again, and this is a view between the houses from Cheriton Road, and this is also a view from Cheriton Road, more of a partial view there. Now, within the application, the reasons given were a number of nuisance issues. There is also a concern about the safety of the tree, a future risk of damage. We haven't received any evidence that the tree is structurally unsafe or unsound with the application. We would expect this kind of evidence to be provided if there were concerns of the tree failing. And due to the high amenity value of the tree and the reasons given and the lack of evidence that's been provided, we recommend this application for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. We now turn to our public contributions. First of all, we have a ward councillor, Councillor Westwood. If you'd like to come forward, please. You have 5 minutes. You know how to switch on the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me address the Planning Committee today in support of this application. I have 3 issues I'd like to discuss. Firstly, let me talk about the amenity value of the tree, which is significant in the officer's presentation there. For those not familiar with the holm oak, is an evergreen broadleaf tree native to the eastern Mediterranean that can grow in excess of 20 metres in height and width and develops a large rounded crown. The tree was protected by a TPO in 1992 when the tree was around 6 or 7 metres in height. In 1992, the tree would have provided great amenity value in a small suburban garden, providing shade in the summer, biodiversity value in and around the tree, and a pleasant outlook from the neighbouring houses. It's unlikely, however, that this tree contributed at that time to the wider amenity value and landscape outside of the immediate neighbouring gardens, because it would not have been able to be seen. Let's roll on 31 years since the TPO was placed on this tree. This is a big tree in a small garden. It's clear the tree is now far too large for its current setting. To support this view that is too large, please note the request shown in the officer's report and approved by this council to reduce the size of this tree in 2003, 2009, 2015, 2018 and in 2020. In addition, the officer's report also considers this tree is too large for its current setting by stating, and I quote, "There is no reason why this tree can't be managed to keep it in proportion to its surroundings," unquote. 31 years after the TPO was applied, this tree has grown to dominate the suburban gardens over which it looks. The amenity value that was recognised in 1992 has long been lost to the immediate neighbourhood. Looking at the wider amenity value of the tree, which was demonstrated by the photographs that the office put up, the officer report states the tree has a good public visual amenity value and its removal would have significant detrimental impact on the landscape and character of the local area. Aside from the views on pages 166 and 167 of your pack, which are taken only 10 metres apart in one specific location, Fordington Avenue, and the view on page 168, which is taken from between the applicant's house and their nearest neighbour, is only the top third of this tree that could be seen from some locations elsewhere around the district. The tree is enclosed in the back gardens of houses. The wider amenity value of this tree is not as great as portrayed by this report. I therefore disagree with the officer's assessment that removal would have a significant detrimental impact on the landscape and character of the local area. There are two other issues that we should take into account when considering this application. The next issue is impact on mental health. Whilst I realise that worry and stress are not material planning reasons for approving the applicant's request, put yourself in their position. This tree is stressful to own and does have an impact on mental health. Stu and his wife purchased a home 25 years ago with a tree in the back garden, which is large but manageable. It had amenity value. This has changed out of all proportion. They now have to spend considerable sums every few years in an attempt to reduce the size of this tree. They're in this position again for the 6th time. This tree dominates the garden, dropping seeds, acorns, leaves all year round, which require constant clearing. Under the very large canopy, the ground is dry, it's difficult to grow other plants and lacks biodiversity. This is a very large evergreen tree, 15 metres to the west of their property. Cheriton Road lost 3 mature lime trees to the Western Gales last year, and this tree is a constant worry to them from the rear of the home. The final issue I'd like to highlight is one of liability. I'm aware of another recent planning request of this committee to fell a tree with the TPO attached to it. The request was granted and the strong reason for approval was the liability position of this council should the tree subsequently cause damage or injury. This risk also exists in this case given the proximity of a large evergreen tree to the houses in shallow soil over a chalk base and a history of trees being impacted by gales in the immediate area. To summarise, I believe this committee should consider the removal of TPO restrictions on this non-native home oak, which no longer provides the amenity value that was delivered when the TPO was placed 30 years ago, and permit the applicant to replace this tree with a native tree more suitable for the garden. This will restore the amenity value for the immediate area, increase biodiversity as required by this council, remove evidence stress having an appropriate sized tree in a suburban garden, and remove the risks associated with this tree. Finally, I must address the issue of climate change. I'm personally against the inappropriate removal of any trees and have argued this case for saving trees many times at this committee. In this specific case, I believe replacement of this tree with a mature tree that would deliver another 50 years plus of value to address climate change is appropriate and will significantly increase the biodiversity of a number of suburban gardens. It is the right route forward in this case. Thank you for your time.
Well done. 5 minutes exactly. Thank you very much, Chris. Okay. Members, do we have questions of clarification for the local ward councillor? No? Okay, thank you very much, Chris. You may return to your seat. And now we have Stuart Dorwood. Hello, Stuart. Thank you for coming along. And you are, I believe, the applicant. And you have 3 minutes when you start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity of talking to you this morning about our application. I'm not going to detain you particularly long because I think Councillor Westwood has given a very adequate sort of overview of our reasons for making this application. I want to emphasise 2 points from the note that I sent round to members at the end of last week. I hope you received that. The first one is about the size of the tree and the fact that it has grown more than twice its height and spread in the 25 years that we've owned the property. That's despite the amount of work that we've actually undertaken on the tree to keep it within check. It's now reached the point where it's dominating our and our neighbours' gardens, and for the reasons that I set out in my note, we are feeling that its value, whatever that is to the community, is far outweighed by the impact that it has on us and our neighbours. I think the main point that we want to make on that respect is the growing concern about safety. I think the note says that the tree is 15-20 metres from the back of our heads. It is now standing 25 metres high. With the fall of other trees in the neighbourhood, we're growing increasingly concerned about the potential impact if this tree came down in a gale. That's one of the main considerations, but I hope that you'll take into account, although I realise that isn't a planning consideration. But addressing the planning issues around amenity value, I think, again, Councillor Westwood has very clearly demonstrated that, in his view, our view, and our neighbours' view, and two of my neighbours are in the room today with me, that the public amenity value, as stated in the officer's report, is really overstated, we feel. If you're unfamiliar with this particular part of Winchester, it is mature suburban gardens with fairly mature trees and that sort of thing. The tree is visible within that context, but it's always visible in the context of a broader landscape, which is a mature suburban setting. Very close to the tree dominates the area. Your officer's photographs show that very clearly. But the dominant feature in the area is the Lime Avenue, which runs along along Sheraton Avenue to Sheraton Road. We feel, and I think it's a debatable point, and you need to form your own view about this, that the tree has not very great public amenity value. Our intention to replace it with something more in keeping with its setting, we feel would mitigate any sort of loss in terms of amenity value, ecological value.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification? Mr. Dorwood. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Dorwood. We have in our pack here, under relevant planning history, numerous occasions on which the tree has had its crown lifted and reshaping and trimming and so on. I wonder, but you now say, if I heard you correctly, that you reached the conclusion at which no further work is desirable and the tree needs to be removed. I wonder if you could say more about any specialist advice you've received which supports your conclusion.
We've used a local firm of tree surgeons over about 20 years to undertake work on the tree as permitted under the applications we've made. The advice we've had from them is that the limit to the extent that they can on reducing the size of the crown is very much a case of, if you do more work to it, it will just grow back more quickly, basically. Certainly in terms of reducing the crown size, the advice we've had is that within 4 or 5 years, that tree, the branches and foliage that we removed would be replaced by new growth. I think that the tree officer also, the tree officers have limited the amount of work that we've been able to do in terms of restricting the size of the tree. I think our tree surgeon has suggested to us that there might be concerns about reducing the crown of the potential for setting up disease within the tree just by virtue of the fact that you've exposed to parts of the trunk and that sort of thing. So the 2 photographs that you have in front of you, I think, show the extent to which the tree has grown over that time. And I would strongly support what Councillor Westwood has said, is that it has now reached the point, despite all the work that we've undertaken on it, that is now posing a considerable problem to us, our neighbours, and the return for that is not very great in terms of its public amenity value in our view.
Another one?
Sorry, just to follow up on that, has this advice that you received from tree surgeons been submitted to the council?
So,
sorry, you just.
We've made applications in consultation with our tree surgeon and also with the tree officer in terms of what we might be permitted to do to the tree. We've never, I don't think we've taken it to the point where we've applied for a crown reduction on the tree, but the advice we've had is that would have a very short-term impact, and that also, there is this concern about setting up infection within the tree itself.
If I may ask a couple of questions, how many neighbouring gardens are affected by this tree?
Our two immediate neighbours are overshadowed by the tree. I'm interested in your previous discussions of previous applications about the overbearing, which is not obviously for residential developments an issue, but I would say that the tree is overbearing in relation to ours and our two immediate neighbours' gardens. We've had support from other residents in our same part of Cheriton Avenue that the tree in Cheriton Road is far too dominant in the area. It causes lots of problems, as you saw from my note, and that we feel ourselves and our neighbours that it's grown far too big for its site, basically.
Normally with an application to fell a protected tree, we would expect to see a professional report from an arboriculturalist or a tree surgeon that would say, explain that they consider that the tree is liable to, that its roots are not well enough rooted, and it might fall in a gale, whatever, or it's got disease, or it's whatever. But we don't have anything in this case, so.
I think my answer on that point would be that we don't dispute the fact that the tree is in a good condition at the moment. It's not a fine example of the species, but it is in good condition. I think our issue with it, particularly from a safety point of view, is that nobody can guarantee that that tree won't come down in a strong gale, and that those severe winter storms are increasing in frequency. So it's something which is constantly affecting ourselves as owners of the tree, and also our neighbours in terms of concern about the damage it might do if it did come down.
Thank you. Any more questions, members? No? Yes, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. If perchance your application is approved here today, what would be your mitigation in terms of replacement?
We're proposing to replace the tree with something which is more in keeping with a suburban setting and is also a native species. I wrote in my application the suggestion about birch or white beam, a tree of that sort of nature, something which probably won't grow to more than about 15-20 metres in height, which would be deciduous and would also harbour and provide protection to a much greater range of wildlife than that Holm oak does. I think the Holm oak is, as Councillor West said, not a native species to this country. I think from a variety of authoritative sources, the indications are the ecological value of Holm oak is far less than native species. So we would expect to provide a tree which is a better home for wildlife, if you'd like to put it that way, than the one that's there at the moment. The only wildlife it harbours at the moment are wood pigeons and a pair of grey squirrels. And the grey squirrels are themselves a problem in that they take any eggs from any nests that are built in the tree or the hedges around.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tree rats, as we know. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Anybody else? No, thank you very much.
If I just say one other thing, I think if you're at all minded to agree with your officer's recommendation, I'd urge you to defer your decision and come and visit the site and see the tree in situ. I think you would probably that would allow you to inform your own decisions about the public amenity value there.
Thank you. I think most of us know the site, the area certainly very well. Okay, but thank you very much. You may return to your seat. Right. John, did you want to add anything to your report following that?
Yes, I'd just like to address a few points. So first of all, with the appropriateness of the TPO, the tree has grown more valuable over time because it's a larger asset within the landscape. And the tempo assessment which we carried out on this tree for the present day, it achieved a score of 19 points out of a possible 25 points on the tempo assessment. So that's a significant score for a tree in the landscape.
the other thing I'd like to say is also that in terms of climate change, these kind of trees are the future. This tree comes from the Mediterranean, and the Mediterranean climate is that bit warmer and drier. We are increasingly seeing that kind of climate here, and these kind of trees are more able to adapt to climate change. And sadly, native trees are not doing as well when it comes to climate change. Holm oaks are all over Winchester. They make up an important component of the landscape there here, and the fact is we'll need these trees to take up the slack when native trees are being lost at a quite significant rate, namely ash trees, other trees. These particular Holm oaks are more resistant to disease than English oak as well, and they just have a higher drought tolerance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So questions for our case officer, please. Councillor Laming.
Thank you. In your opinion, is it a mature tree? Has it got much longer to live? What would your estimates be if we left it there?
So I'd say that that tree's got at least easily more than 40 years still, and it's a mature tree. It's definitely got to a mature stage, but there's still a lot more life in that tree yet.
Supplementary then, if you don't mind, Chair. How much taller would you estimate that it could grow?
I wouldn't envisage it growing too much taller at the present time, but it, you know, there's evidence there that the tree's rounded shape has been, you know, it's been well managed with previous applications that have been approved for pruning works. It would be a lot more spreading if it hadn't been managed in such a way, and I would just repeat again that there's no reason why this tree can't be managed with reasonable pruning works going forward.
Councillor Wallace.
So oaks are famously home to a lot of species. I mean, I know it might be slightly out of your area, but typically how many species would you say would be home on that tree?
So, sorry, could you just repeat?
How many different types of plants and animals kind of use that as a home? How many species does it support?
Well, I haven't got an exact number of species, but there are many different species which are supported. Birds like jays would still eat the acorns and that kind of thing. Also, mammals would feed on the acorns. The catkins support many insects and bees that will pollinate them as well. So there is value in this tree from a biodiversity value. There is still value there, even though it's a non-native tree.
Any more questions, members? No? Debate? Councillor Pearson.
I've got to say this is one of the most extraordinary applications I've seen in a long time. The council policy is to preserve trees, indeed to plant trees, not to fell them. Judging by the location in the maps that John has shown us, it's well away from any buildings that it might damage. And in my opinion, trees, deciduous trees, tend to shed their leaves. I've got 26 in my garden. Believe you me, they shed leaves all right. But that's one of the glories of a tree. It's one of the glories of the tree as a habitat, and what shedding those leaves does to nature. Every point is a plus point. I'm sorry, applicant, but I agree 100% what John has said. No evidence, no sickness, no falling limbs. The only falling thing is trees. It's getting taller. Trees do tend to do that. I can't see any reason why this tree should be felled. Yes, it's a dominant feature. Of course it is. Trees are. I'm sorry, applicant, but
Thank you,
100% behind the tree officer.
Thank you, thank you. Other contributions, Councillor Wallace?
Agree with my colleague. It's a mature tree. There is no reason, in fact, supporting a lot of biodiversity, and it's going to be type of tree is going to become more dominant as the climate gets hotter in our area. So yes, I see we should be supporting this type of tree rather than trying to cut them down.
Councillor Gordon-Smith?
Yes, I think I've seen home oaks growing on the Isle of Wight at Ventnor, where they're exposed to southwesterly gales, very much exposed, growing on shallow chalk soils, and they don't get uprooted. If there is a danger of them going over, you generally get the plate lift, and you can see that. I'd hesitate to disagree with our tree officer, but there's a specimen in Fulham Palace that's 500 years old. I mean, oaks have a tremendously long, home oaks are very long lived. And I think it'd be, to my opinion, very unwise to cut it down when it's precisely the sort of tree that we need. And I think the shade, it may be a problem at the moment, but I think in 20 years' time, people will be very glad of it. So I would not approve this.
Councillor Lamy?
I have tremendous sympathy with the owner of the property. He's obviously looked after the tree extremely well and made sure that it was looked after and maintained properly. However, it is a species which is better tolerant to drought than some of our native species, and oaks do support a large number of wildlife, and it makes it a very difficult decision, but I think I will support the tree officer on this particular application.
Thank you. Any more? No, I think our tree officer would look very kindly on a further application to manage the tree. But I think that we as a committee can't agree to it coming down, I'm afraid. But we will have a vote now on that. So the application to fell this home oak is recommended for refusal. Can I see all those members in favour of refusing that application? That's all members. So I'm afraid that's refused. But with sympathy. We understand your position, but you know, we do have a climate emergency to cope with. So right, thank you very much, members. Now we turn to our next item, which is number 11, which is Land at Oak Tree Farm, Skiviers Lane, Upham, Winchester. And the presenting officer is our other tree officer, Ivan Girdler.
Thank you, Chair. So this item's the confirmation of TPO 2233 at Oak Tree Farm, Skiviers Lane, Upham. The recommendation is to confirm the TPO. That we have received one letter of objection, which is in your pack there, which outlines the summary of the objection. Now this is the copy of the TPO map, which shows you where the trees are. So you can see T1 at the bottom there. Just trying to get, does the mouse work? Anyway, T1 is the south there, and you've got T18 up the top there. So the TPS for 18 trees. The next slide is a aerial view of the site, which shows you know, the house and the storage yard. Now, the proposal is an application to demolish the existing farmhouse, which you can see there. Get the mouse to work. Going to. sorry, yeah. So where is it? It's over there. Moving, is it? Yeah, there is. So there is the one, there is the existing house there in the middle there. So there's an application to, no, we don't want that. The application was to demolish the existing house and rebuild a new one there, and also an application to extend the barn and do various works in the yard. The application was split into two, and then a third application was received to build a workers' dwelling where the caravan is, which is to the north of the existing house there. Don't know where we're going with this. Right. Yeah. So part of the application was to fell 2 trees for access onto the site, a new access, which is T5 and T6. So this is T5 and T6. So the proposal was to remove the 2 trees to put an entranceway in for the new dwelling. This is looking along the lane northwards. This is the line of trees along the front of the property. So we're going from south to north along the country lane. You can see the trees and the hedgerow there. This is at the end. This is T15, which is at the very end of the line of trees. It's on the front. And it's English oak. They're all English oak trees. And this is looking across the field to T16, 17, 18, which is to the north end of the site. So the next slide is looking back south. So this is going back the other way, looking down towards the dwelling. The same trees, but you're looking the other way now, going south. And again, this is looking through the trees to T1 and T2, which is on the southern side of the site. Some of the trees are requiring surgery. There's no argument there. There's dead wood in the trees, which part of the application was to say fell T5 and T6 and to remove the dead wood and try and reduce these trees to for safety reasons over the highway. This is again from the highway looking across from the south. T1, I think it is. For extent, you can see the barn there. The barn there was the part of the application was to extend the barn on the tree side there, though it would be a fair distance away from the tree. And this is from the neighbour's property from the south. So you're looking, standing north on the south side, looking across from the neighbour's property to see T1. Again, this is here. This is the other side of T5 and T6, which the process was to fell them to put the entranceway in. As you can see, no, sorry, it's 3 and 4. 5 and 6 behind it. This shows a gap in the line of trees that an entranceway could be put in there. So 5 and 6, 3 and 4 could be kept and protected, an entranceway put through, and the trees could be retained without damage to them. So that is it. Oh, sorry, no, that's from the neighbour's garden. This is on the public right of way. There's a public right of way that runs on the back of the property. That's T18, T16, 17 there. Again, that's from the entranceway. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ivan. We have one public speaker who is Graham Smith. No, we have, sorry, wrong one. We have 3 objectors, Matthew Jensen, Stephen Rose and Rob Hughes. Are you all going to speak, or is one of you going to? Okay, and you've agreed how you're going to split your 3 minutes. Okay, that's fine. Please come forward. The timer will start when you start speaking, so thank you.
Good afternoon, all members, and thank you for letting us speak. My name is Matthew Jensen. I'm founder, lead consultant and agent for Oak Tree Farm, founder of Fraser Line Consultancy. I'm going to keep my bit relatively short. From the master plan scheme, which we've got consented, We've always, from day one, been considerate of trees and making sure that the ARB side has been part of the proposal. And obviously the sensitivity of any redevelopment works being away from any kind of highly sensitive trees and bits and pieces. The one thing I was just wanted to reiterate from the tree officer was that the third application actually proposed agricultural works bungalows to the south, not to the north. So that is not actually where the caravan is. There's two caravans. It's the southern caravan. The one thing that I will say is that the access, the rationale behind placing the access in its proposed consented position was because of the danger on the road. It's a national speed limit road. Visibility is quite difficult. And obviously that's been part of the consideration with the proposal, again, from a very early concept stage. I'll be passing over now to Stefan Rose, the agricultural consultant.
Thank you. I'm Stefan Rose. I advise Mr. Hughes, the tree owner, in relation to trees on his site. The TPO was served in sort of direct response to the planning application, and the local authority have approved that application. So that's a sort of a separate matter. We're here to confirm whether the trees are rightfully TPO'd or not. For me, the trees are under good management. Mr. Hughes hasn't tried to do any preemptive felling prior to or during his planning application, which he could have quite reasonably done. Whether that be right or wrong morally is for people to consider, but he has looked after those trees, and we've managed those trees up to this point, and I see no reason why that management of the trees would change post approval being built. The trees clearly provide a positive feature for the land and the site itself. That's not in debate, and as such, Mr. Hughes is more than happy to keep managing the trees as he happily has done, and he will happily do so. After all, the farm is known as Oak Tree Farm. Due to the lack of any threat for removal of the trees post-development, there is no sound reason to confirm the TPO. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for our representatives here? No? Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. You may return to your seats. Thank you. Ivan, did you want to add anything following that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just to say that, yeah, we acknowledge it is a country lane and there's an entranceway, but the entranceway can still be done with an engineering solution and sympathy to keep the trees. There's no reason why it can't be done. You can achieve both things. The trees are still under threat. I noticed that branches have been cut off T5 on one side, but there's two sort of triggers for the TPO. That the development is sort of due, and they do have amenity value, so there's a threat to them from development. But also the TPO doesn't stop maintenance work. If the applicant wants to maintain the trees, an application comes forward, we will consider the application fairly and logically look at it and take a view from there. So, just because you've got TPO on it doesn't stop you doing any works to the trees. It just ensures good practice follows.
Indeed. Thank you, Ivan. Right, members, we'll have questions on the report. No questions? Debate? Councillor Pearson.
The proposal presumably to get access to a proposed caravan site, and it strikes me when listening to the argument in favour of not having a TPO, those people in caravans are coming down to the countryside to admire the countryside. One of the things they admire in the countryside are the trees. So I find the proposal quite, I won't go as far as to say outrageous, but a bit startling. Yeah, we're assured they will be managed. Well, I'm a bit cynical about that. I'm not saying that they would not do that, but I've seen so many instances where trees have disappeared overnight in order to a development to take place. I'm a bit apprehensive. Well, you've heard me time and time again. A tree would have to be a dangerous situation. It would close to houses, damaging the houses. But in the countryside, they're a major feature of the countryside, for goodness sake. As I said a few moments ago, our policy is to plant trees, not to fell them, in order to aid a development. So I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I'm 100% behind our tree officer. And he's well experienced. He doesn't say things that he doesn't. I've known Aaron for 20 years or so. And he's never certainly taken me down the garden path. I don't always agree with him, but in this case, I agree with 100%. So I'm supporting the TPOs.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Any other contributions? Councillor Wallace?
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't think there's much of a gap here. I think the owner wants to look after the trees. We want the trees looked after. I don't think that putting a TPO on those trees is going to put a significant additional burden. I know that our tree officers will work with the applicant to try and minimise any impact of having a TPO and support you in creating the maintenance. So yes, I will fully support putting this TPO in place.
Thank you. I'd just like to say it's a shame that the application, which I now understand has been permitted, requires the removal of the two of the trees that we're about to confirm the TPO on, but there you go. The rest will be protected, won't they? So, any more contributions? No? So, members, this application...
Sorry, Chair, that I believe these trees are actually within the site of the National Park. Yes, I thought they were. So quite clearly, I know we haven't asked them, but I think they would be staggered if those trees were removed.
Well, that's another issue. But at least we know that if it doesn't go ahead, they're protected because they've got a TPO. So can I see those in favour of confirming this tree protection order, please? That's all members. Thank you very much. So that is confirmed. And now we move on to item number 12, and Ivan swaps back with John. So this application is to confirm a TPO for trees on land at Winchester Railway Station in the centre of Winchester. Our officing presenter is John Bartlett. If you'd like to give your presentation, John, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is for the confirmation of TPO 2334 for Winchester Railway Station. To give you some background, we received a letter in March from a resident to say that these trees were due to be felled on the weekend in March. And the concerns from Network Rail were that they were lifting up the paving in that area within the station, and so we urgently put a TPO to protect these 7 London plane trees, which are shown on the map. And here's the aerial photos of the trees in question as well. They are an important asset in the context of the landscape there. There's a high amount of footfall there, so a lot of people will see these trees within the station complex, and they have amenity value that is worthy of a TPO. It's another angle here. Give some perspective. The trees have been fenced off, as you can see, due to the concerns with health and safety and the trip hazard. And this is a photo of the paving which has been slightly lifted. Now, we have suggested a engineering solution which has been is widely recognised in the arboriculture industry, which is FlexiPave, that can be installed instead of the paved area that you see. And this is just to give an example of another surface. So this is in the Broadway. This was before this particular surface was installed. So it's a paved surface before, which was being lifted up there, with an area of tarmac also being lifted. And then in this case, Flexi mulch was installed. So this is just to give you an idea of the different surfaces and solutions for different areas. This is Eastleigh Railway Station. This is the FlexiPave surface that we've recommended for the station. This was with kind of newly planted trees, but it shows that it has been used in other stations. As our recommendation is to confirm TPO 2334. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And we have a public speaker, is the objector Graham Smith, who has a presentation as well, I understand. A couple of photos. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. You will have 3 minutes once you started speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. First of all, I work for Network South Western Railways, but can it be noted that this objection is both from South Western Railways and Network Rail combined, and I'm here objecting on behalf of both parties. Also, secondly, I'd like to say the tree officer from Winchester City Council, Mr. Bartlett, was invited to a meeting on the 8th of December to discuss this very issue, an invitation which he declined. So for him to then say, you know, the first he knew of it was at the start of March is disingenuous. We tried numerous routes to contact the council to elicit some interest in our proposals, and apart from one courtesy response which my colleague Mr. Dominy received, we did not get any feedback or any interest from the council to discuss our proposals. The only reason why we, SWR and Network Rail, wish to remove the trees is because they have become a trip hazard, and the trip hazards in this area have been causing accidents for several years now. Unfortunately, these accidents have resulted in several serious injuries. We have received claims for damages as a result of these injuries, and if we carry out work that does not satisfactorily resolve the issue, we will be liable for claims of an increasing size due to perceived inaction. After considering various different proposals at length, we decided on a plan which we believe will enhance and improve both the visual aspect of the area and the biodiversity. The existing trees do not have any method of root containment. At this stage in their life, to attempt to install root containment would likely kill the trees or cause them to fall. Without root containment, any works we carry out here will last only 2 or 3 years before further remedial work is required. This is due to the geology in the vicinity where solid chalk is close to the surface, which forces the roots up and to find an easier path, which in this case is the sand just below the paving. Should the TPO remain in place on it to cover these trees, SWR will need to seek approval from Winchester City Council every time there is a trip hazard or when pruning is required to maintain the condition of the trees. This will delay the speed at which we can respond to issues and may result in temporary fencing being erected while we wait for permission to carry out the work. We were asked to consider an alternative paving solution by officers of Winchester City Council, and we do not believe this will resolve the issues found in this specific location. The proposal has been rejected by both Network Rail and SWR. Winchester City Council have highlighted that FlexiPave has previously been used on railway land at Eastleigh Station. This is true, however, both locations are completely different. The FlexiPave at Eastleigh Station was installed as part of a larger scheme when Eastleigh Station forecourt was remodelled, during which time the trees were planted. The soil here is is alluvial floodplain, so the roots have plenty of space to grow into.
Afraid you've run out of time now. So I'll have to stop you if that's okay. But members, do we have any questions of clarification for Mr. Smith? Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Oh, hang on. Councillor Laming.
If you remove these trees, is there any plans then to replant anything in a better way?
Yes, there is. Our initial proposal was to plant 3 native trees, as the trees here are non-native. They're a breed of an oriental maple with an American maple, which have limited ecological value. We were going to plant 3 native trees and work with the council to identify other locations within Winchester City Council where we could contribute to increasing the number of trees potentially beyond the 7 that we were planning to remove.
In other words, we'd lose the trees on the station approach permanently.
Sorry?
We would lose the trees on the station approach permanently.
No, we would plant 3 trees in that vicinity to replace the 7. We would argue that the existing trees are planted too closely together. London planes can grow to at least 30 metres tall with a canopy spread of 30 metres, and the existing trees are planted less than 5 metres apart. So the limbs are going to clash and cause issues as they grow.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, you referred to the fact that you had carefully investigated and considered a number of other options. I don't know, I'm guessing perhaps engineering solutions or other approaches. Without going into all the detail, obviously, I wonder if you could just quickly explain to us why none of those other options was feasible in your view.
The main issue, the 2 main issues, the existing trees, like I've said, are too close together. So in any other setting, you'd be looking to thin these out anyway to reduce the number, given the size of the trees. The second issue is the root containment. Whatever we do, we could attempt to install root containment, but there is a risk to the life of the trees. And realistically, the only way to install root containment now is to pollard the trees. So we cut back the vast majority of the canopy just to leave the main stem and drop the root containment over the top, but we'd be cutting back the roots. It was felt that this would ultimately likely kill the trees, and it would be much better to start from scratch and plant, like I say, 3 native trees in this area and work with the council to plant additional trees elsewhere within Winchester. I would also argue that removing these trees would not, remove all the trees in the area, because there are significant beech trees just behind these on Stockbridge Road, which, because they are more mature than the London planes, are causing the London planes to lean away from them to try and get light. So it's, it wouldn't leave a bare area removing them. I understand it's not ideal. We don't look to remove trees unnecessarily. We've looked at all the options, and this is considered the best solution by both ourselves and Network Rail.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, members? No? Thank you very much. You may return to your seat. Thank you. John, did you want to say anything in response before we ask General?
Yes, if I may, Chair. Yeah. In terms of the meeting, the initial meeting that I was invited to, we believed at the time that this was a highways issue because we believed that they were under the management of Hampshire Highways. So in consultation with colleagues, we thought it was best to for them to go to Hampshire Highways first. A subsequent meeting was arranged in about April, I think it was, quite a few months ago, with a number of people on site, including senior managers from Winchester City Council. So we have discussed these matters with them with Network Rail on site as well. In terms of the FlexiPave surface, our experience of using this surface is that it can be installed without severing routes. So this was in terms of trees I've dealt with on the highway in the past, and what the FlexiPave surface does is it flexes with the roots. So you get other surfaces like resin bonded surfaces that will easily break up, but the surface is kind of it's made of rubber crumb and granite as well, and it allows it to be a far more flexible surface that flexes with the roots as time progresses. In terms of the replacement trees, it'll take a significant time for them to have the same impact as those London plane trees. Towards 20 years, that they're going to have the same sort of impact. And in terms of pollution and nitrates in the atmosphere, these trees are planted all over London, in Whitehall, Westminster, central London, where they take a lot of nitrates out of the atmosphere, and the leaves that are particularly hairy take in that many more kind of nitrates. So they are a very, very valuable asset to this.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Yes, I mean, I feel that the London plane are not strictly speaking a native, but they've been around in this country for hundreds of years. And as John Bartlett said, they're very, very good. They planted them in London because they would survive being covered with soot. And I think actually they make a great feature coming out of the railway station. And further down, you've got a similar bank of plane trees outside the records office. And I'll say it's one of the few nice places at the entrance to Winchester. I'd be very loath to see these go. Because there is a cycle parking underneath, and there's quite a lot of obstruction there, in fact, at the moment. And if you look at older photographs of when the bicycles are there, it's almost completely closed off to easy pedestrian movement underneath there. I've seen the FlexiPave, and I think it's a pretty workable solution. And I think we have to recognise that tree roots do lift pavements. I mean, that's something you have to take into account when you plant them. But I think that's a workable solution, and I would hope that tree officers and Network Rail can work together to come up with a practical solution. Doesn't require ripping them out, which will not go down very well. Right, thank you.
Good, I think that's covered it. No more debates, good, okay. So the recommendation is that we confirm the TPO on these trees. Can I see those in favour, please? That's all members. Thank you very much. So that is confirmed. Thank you, everybody. That's the end of today's planning committee.